Good evening. Good evening. There we go. Today is August 19th, 2019, and you are part of our Rowan County Board of Commissioners meeting. We look forward to these meetings and look forward to seeing you all here, and we're glad that you're here. We hope that you find your evening and time with us profitable. So we start out, as always, with a tradition of doing a couple of things. We're going to have a pledge, but we also have what is called a solemnizing prayer. Now, that is not for you. That is for us. You're welcome to listen along if you like, but these prayers are for us. They'll be given by our chaplain. What the commissioners on our job, we are always looking for wisdom to do what's in the best interest of everyone in Rowan County. So we'll get started. Commissioners, if you'll join me, we'll begin.
Father, we come to you tonight and thank you for the privilege to be here tonight. Thank you for our county commissioners, dear Lord, and the preparation they've made for this meeting tonight. I pray you give them the wisdom they need as we have this meeting tonight, Lord, and thank you for the dedication and love that they have to do what they do, Lord, for citizens of Rowan. Thank you for this county, dear Lord. Pray you can guide and direct us tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Chaplain Taylor, for being with us. Always good to see you. All right, so on the agenda tonight, Commissioners, I got a couple of items. We have a motion to go to closed session, so we'll add that as item 12A. And then we also have a consent agenda item relative to the rescheduled public hearing for the personnel ordinance revisions. We'll add that as consent agenda item O. All right, are there any other additions or deletions to the agenda? All right, if there aren't any, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All right, got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Then let's see. We'll got a motion to approve the consent agenda as the consent agenda as amended. Do we have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Let's see. Where are the minutes on here? Huh? There are no minutes? Okay. I got you. All right. Then we'll move to special recognition. Is Chief Solis here? If you guys would come forward. Got a recognition designation that we'd like to talk about tonight.
Good evening, Commissioners. One of the goals of emergency services has been to increase our community's ability to bounce back from a disaster. Approximately 98% of all presidentially declared disasters are weather-related. Tonight, we're here to share with you a significant achievement that will increase our community's resilience toward weather events. To explain more, I'd like to introduce Tricia Palmer, who's with the Warning Coordination Meteorologist with National Weather Service in Greensville, Spartanburg.
Good evening.
Hey,
Thank you for having me tonight. As you said, my name is Tricia Palmer. I'm the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina. Rowan County is one of the 46 counties that we cover in our forecast and warning area. Storm Ready is a nationally recognized program. Storm Ready is a national program run by the National Weather Service that recognizes a county or community or university's efforts to improve their emergency first responder and community preparedness for natural disasters, high impact weather related events, and things of that nature. We have been very proud and pleased to partner with Rowan County during this process, and I am honored to inform you all that as of today, August 19th, Rowan County is now a storm ready county.
Wow.
So we have here a certificate for you guys, and I don't know if TJ wants to get it out, but we've got a sign And we are really, like I said, we've been really pleased with the partnership we've had with emergency management here in Rowan County.
Is there anyone here someone here to get a picture of this? Got one of your folks? All right.
Got some folks coming.
You want to come out?
Yeah, you guys want to go out and we'll get a picture with them? All right, give these guys a big deal.
He wanted me to finish up.
Okay.
Hold on. Commissioners, I'd just like to thank you for your continued support, and along with that recognition that really is out of motivation for the community overall to establish a resilient community. I just also want to recognize T.J. Brown for his hard work. This is about a year-long effort that he's undertaken on his own, essentially, to coordinate with National Weather Service, conduct some training out in the community, and get our entire organization ready. So really appreciate his help and appreciate your support. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Chief. I was looking through this, and it says Storm Ready provides jurisdictions with a standard level of preparedness for hazardous weather and recognizes emergency managers for their hard work. And there's a lot of benefits to that, not only community safety and human safety, but a couple insurance guys here. It helps benefit our ISO ratings in the community and helps lower national flood insurance premiums. So this is a big deal. If you've ever seen their emergency operations when we have weather that's coming in, especially the hurricane last year, it is a sight to behold. And so there's folks working 24 hours a day. We're getting constant emails from TJ keeping us updated as to what Rowan County is doing in order to keep us on top of this storm. And so these guys and ladies are real professionals, and we feel that we're in good hands. Not the Allstate thing, but we appreciate what you do, and thank you. And I've still got my radio at home, so
Okay,
yeah,
good.
Yeah, that's good. So
Thank you very
guys.
much.
We're real proud of you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris, TJ. Thank you. All right, thanks. All right, public comment. I think we've got Rod Kreider sign up for public comment. We'll give you 4 minutes if you need it.
Well, I have some recognition also I'd like to give to the commissioners this evening. We did it partially at our annual meeting about a week and a half ago, our first ever that we had. And during that meeting, we instituted a new recognition program, one for public sector partners and one for our private sector partners that we are calling the Rowan Rockstar Awards for Economic Development. And these are given to folks who have really done a lot to promote economic development and the growth of our county over the past year. And as a board of commissioners, I'm here to let you know that if you hadn't heard already, which I think you may have read about in the paper, that the Rowan County Board of Commissioners was our first recipient of the Public Sector Award for Economic Development. And we did that because you have all done so much to support economic development as a commission. You have invested in infrastructure, you have invested in workforce, you have invested in our capacity to do our job better, to bring businesses here and help existing ones to grow. And you've sent out the word that this is a friendly place for business. And so we're getting more recognition, we're getting more looks, we're seeing more projects. And as a result, we've seen some very high-profile businesses land here, not least among those is Chewy, which announced back in April that they were coming, Hinkle, which announced a week or two ago that they were investing $45 million. And shortly before you, you have two other potential investments that will be occurring in our county, and we've got more in the pipeline. So we're really, really pleased with your support, with everything that you've done to promote economic growth. And so for that, we have some plaques for you. Two of them already received theirs. I don't know if the other three have seen those yet. So, Craig, I'm going to give you yours first. I'll bring it to you. But this is our Rowan Economic Development Rockstar Award. And
Probably sell that one.
I've got mine.
Yeah, but hang on the wall.
Thank you.
That was a great event. It was now about a week and a half ago. Economic development is funded in part by the county, but also each municipality helps fund the EDC through like a percentage of their municipal tax revenue. So we've not had an annual meeting before, and Rod has started that so that he can talk to the municipalities and the investors and let them know what's going on in economic development. Their special speaker was the editor of Site Selection Magazine. Ron Starner came up from Atlanta and gave a very good report on Rowan and some insight as to what economic developers and site selection consultants from across the country, what their viewpoint of Rowan County is. And it's very good, and it's getting much better. And so we have bright days ahead, and thank you to Rod's work and his team with Scott and their staff for everything they're doing. We see some real positive growth right here on the horizon. So thank you guys very much. Brad Jenkins.
Hello, my name is Brad Jenkins. I wanted to introduce myself to the committee here, the commissioners, and I am running for House District 83, and as such, some of that encompasses the Rowan County area, and it is such a wonderful county to live in. The entire time we've lived in North Carolina, we have called Rowan County home. We love this county, and I know how vital it is to have somebody in Raleigh that has a great working relationship with the people here, the commissioners, and just as effective at communicating. All that you guys are doing in the county already is absolutely incredible. We appreciate all that you're doing, and it is very vital for you to have a good, strong, conservative voice that's effective in Raleigh so that what's happening at the state level can also happen here in Rowan County on a much greater level. My desire is to be effective. My desire is to adequately take your voices as commissioners back to the state and really have an impact from the commissioners to the state level as well. I know, as I'd mentioned before, it is just so vital to have strong working relationships with all of the elected officials, and I want to again just announce that I'm running for House District 83. Introduce myself, Brad Jenkins. I'm a pastor in the Landis, North Carolina area. I have 5 kids, and that alone should tell you that I know how to deal with conflict resolution. And that is certainly needed in the political arena today with the divisiveness that we have in our political arena. And so I just want to introduce myself, get to know you guys. If you have any questions for me, I'll be around, and I would love to be your representative to effectively share conservative values in Raleigh for the Rowan County area. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. All right, we'll move on then with our agenda for the day. So, let's see, item number 4, Scott Shelton, public hearing and request for a revised incentive agreement for Project Special. Scott, welcome back again.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. There's a lot on the agenda. I'll try to make this one quick for you. I'm back again to talk about Project Special. As you may recall, back in April, I brought this to the Commission and requested incentives, and the board was very gracious in granting those incentives. It is an existing employer in Rowan County. Again, on April 15th, you approved a Level 1 grant for the project. Originally, they were going to bring 35 jobs to Rowan County and invest $18 million in equipment. But since that grant was approved, some of the parameters have changed a little bit. The company is now proposing 30 jobs instead of 35. Investment has dropped some as well. It's a little under $12 million versus the 18 we first discussed. But again, the company does expect to complete primary construction on the project by the end of 2020. And I had some numbers for you there in your packet. And basically, during the 5 incentivized years, the county would collect about $333,000. Provide an incentive grant of about $250,000 and retain $83,000 during those 5 years. Over 10 years, collect $654,000, disperse that $254,000 grant I just mentioned, and retain about $403,000 of new revenue for the county. And also another update since the last time I brought this to your attention, since that time the state has recommended a $300,000 building reuse grant for the company to help pay for their improvements. You may recall at your August 5th meeting on the consent agenda, you approved a resolution applying for this grant, which is kind of a technicality. This grant should be approved on the 22nd by the state's Rural Infrastructure Authority. It does require a local match of 5% of the grant, which in this case is $15,000. Of course, your Level 1 incentive grant more than covers that local match requirement. And I know when I first sent a memo to you back in August, we said something along the lines that we didn't think this would guarantee the project, but we felt pretty good about it. Since that time, we feel pretty strongly now that if the state approves this grant on Thursday, that the company will select Rowan. I think pretty much the wheels are in motion for that to happen, but again, we have to wait for the state. If that is the case, the state would likely announce this project on Thursday, maybe Friday. They normally announce, this committee meets every couple of months, and they announce all these incentive grants throughout the state in one long press release. But we do anticipate them approving that, and hopefully that'll mean this project will come to Rowan County. But for today, I'd like to request that the commissioners approve a revised incentive agreement that reflects these new job numbers and also the revised investment number.
All right, thank you, Scott. Are there any questions for Scott? All right, if not, then we will conduct a public hearing. So the rules say that if we're going to provide an incentive grant, that the general public has an opportunity to speak on it. So we'll open the floor now. And if anyone would like to speak for or against, or just has anything to say in general, now would be the time. All right, not seeing anyone, we'll close the floor. And commissioners, do we have a motion to approve the revised incentive agreement for Project Special?
So moved.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Scott. All right, you're up again.
Okay, second request from EDC tonight is for the Empire Hotel project. I know that this board and the community is very familiar with this project. It's been a source of discussion for many years now. But the EDC thought it an opportune time to come before the board and discuss the project and see what the county might be able to do to assist with it. What we're talking about is a potential $13 million increase to the tax base of Rowan County, and over 10 years, a net in tax revenue for the county of about $278,000. Also, we feel there's a potential for other economic impacts through the creation of retail jobs in the storefronts from the renovated building, and also additional personal and sales tax revenue. And also, we feel it's an opportunity to assist an historic property in Rowan County. Just a little bit about the hotel. Construction began on it in 1855. It opened in 1859. There was a major remodeling of the hotel in 1907. And then around 1963, the hotel closed. I think at the time it was more of apartments than it was a hotel. And from the 1890s till 2007, it was owned by the Ragsdale family in Jamestown. But currently, Downtown Salisbury, Inc. is the owner of the property. As far as the potential project, Black Point Investments, a Charlotte-based company, has a purchase option to redevelop the hotel into apartments and, as I mentioned, commercial space. And one of their partners, Mr. Britt Weaver, is here in the audience as well, in case there's anything that needs to be asked of him. The hotel would be redeveloped using historic tax credits and financing with HUD's 221D4 program. And under the proposal, BPI would create 62 market rate apartments and 6 small retail spaces fronting South Main Street, and then another 22,000 square feet of retail space will be created in the former Montgomery Ward main floor, mezzanine and basement areas. And again, once it's done, we anticipate the value of the property to increase to $13 million. Right now, BPI is in negotiation with the city regarding several components of the project, including extending the purchase option contract to June of 2020, and also discussing different sales prices depending on the purchase date of the property. The city is also discussing incentives, including tap fee waivers, reimbursement for a water line extension, sidewalk improvements, and also providing parking spaces to the project. I know they're going to be talking about some of those incentives at their meeting this week, but I think on September 17th, they're going to be discussing the parking spaces through a public hearing as well. And as you'll recall, both the county and the city approved historic landmark status for the hotel, which makes future private owners of the property eligible for a 15% property tax referral, and that's every year. BPI was hoping to receive about $1 million in state funds to assist with the redevelopment of the property, but since this time, the allocation has been removed from the budget for whatever reason. I think that's still being discussed right now, but for the time being, it's not in the budget. BPI estimates, again, $13 million would be the value of the building. And right now, because it's owned by Downtown Salisbury, it's not generating any tax revenue at all for the city or the county. And normally, for an investment of this number, it would qualify for a Level 1 grant through the county's incentive program, which normally is equivalent to a 75% increase, 75% tax grant on revenue generated from a project. The numbers I provided in your packet were based on, of course, the current tax rate of 65.75 cents per $100, and again, based on $13 million in improvements occurring before the end of 2021. And we estimate during those 5 incentivized years, the county would collect about $427,000. But again, due to the property's landmark status, the automatic tax reduction would be about $213,000 over 5 years. And then with this incentive grant that we're proposing, they would receive for 5 years another $106,000. During those 5 years, the county would retain $106,000 themselves during the term. Over 10 years, we're talking about $769,000 in revenue. The total of that 50% tax reduction would be about $384,000. And also, again, the county would disperse a $106,000 grant during this time and keep about $277,000 of new net revenue. And in your packet, I included a analysis that was done in 2018 and was commissioned by the city of Salisbury to look at other impacts of the project. I didn't want to get too deep into those numbers because I know they're about a year and a half old, but I think that the general consensus of the study is it would generate additional personal property tax revenue, mainly through the residents of the apartments' motor vehicle taxes. There would also be additional local option sales tax revenue, also new retail jobs, which the report projected to be 75. Then also we think there'd be some temporary economic benefits during the construction period, such as wages for the construction workers, sales tax revenue for supplies, worker spending in the community, permit fees, and things of that nature. And again, it would be an incentive agreement between Black Point Investments and Rowan County for 5 years. They could only request payment when all taxes were paid to the county. In closing, and we understand this is a unique project compared to other things we normally bring before the board, but we do feel that this redeveloped Empire Hotel would bring, of course, additional tax base to the community and net revenue to the community as well. But also we think it's important to try to find a way to get this project going and bring additional residents to the downtown community, which would increase, of course, the city and the county's population, and hopefully encourage other businesses to locate nearby. And also, we feel that there would be an additional sales tax revenue benefit to the county through these retail spaces and also through the spending of these downtown residents. And also, again, finally, construction jobs would be created through this project for the year-and-a-half period of the construction period. And also, there'd be permanent retail businesses that would spring up as a result of this redevelopment. So, again, we hope you would consider at least discussing this project and also the incentives for it to help move this project along and spur development in downtown Salisbury. And again, we'll open the floor to any questions you have. So,
All right, questions for Scott?
Scott, is there, do we have examples of other similar situations that we've approved in the county?
I'm sorry, similar situations in
Other examples of other projects that weren't specifically related to jobs? Incentives that we approved?
Not directly, no, at least not in my tenure here. I know we've talked about some things such as, years ago, the downtown school administration building, that was discussed, and there was some, we thought, residual benefit from that. But as far as coming to the board for incentives, I can't recall any, to be honest with you.
So basically, we're being asked to provide tax credits on a building that is in a 501(c) or some other tax shielded group at this point in time. So we're receiving no tax revenue on it at this point.
That's correct. It's owned by a nonprofit organization. My understanding is no tax revenue is being generated. Of course, once it switches over to private hands, again, just for full disclosure, it would receive a permanent 50% tax reduction due to this historic landmark status. What we're asking for tonight is just some additional incentives for the project, which is another 25%, which gets it to that 75% threshold for a grant we normally do. But that 25% would just be for those 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
And Scott, one more time, how many new jobs are estimated?
Well, and again, the source of this was that report. They estimated 75 retail jobs. It was a study commissioned by the city. We weren't involved with it, so I'm not sure where the numbers came from exactly, but it was 75 retail jobs, and obviously some of those are going to be part-time. We're trying to work on some revised numbers now through the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, but we're going to have a little bit more time to generate that sort of thing. It's more time-consuming than we would have thought for something like this, just because of the unique nature of the project.
So how would the clawbacks work for this particular grant? How do we judge that they're following what needs to be done to get the...
Well, this one wouldn't be tied to jobs like a lot of the traditional grants we do, just because of the retail nature of these jobs. So I think really what we'd be talking about is just a pure tax incentive grant, to where if you pay the taxes, you get a percentage back. If project doesn't happen, there's no tax incentives there, or if it's less than the 13 million, let's say it's 10 million, the grant would be reduced accordingly. But in this case, there's nothing tied to jobs that we would propose at this point.
So if it just, once it went to the owned by a private individual or company, and not the 501c3, and it just sat there for 5 years, they'd still get the grants, even if they didn't do any construction or any upgrades, because there's no way to...
If it just sat there and there was no improvement to the value of the property, they would just be taxed at the current rate. I think the current value of the property is about $900,000, so they'd be taxed at that rate.
Yeah, the 25% really only kicks in once they make the improvements, because we use the base value when they acquire it. Then they make the improvements, and the 25% is in that gap. The 50% that he's talking about, the historic landmark, that's there regardless. So the 25% kicks in if there's an improved value against the baseline value. Okay. So that presumes that investment has been made to improve the value.
So that's sort of the clawback. They've got to do the improvement, or they're not going to get anything.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it'd be a money drain. If they were to acquire the property, it would go off the nonprofit status to a private ownership. They'd start paying taxes on that $900,000 value, and there'd be no tax grant for it. So it'd behoove them to move the project forward if at all possible.
So the incentive would be on the improvements?
Correct. Right now, again, they estimate the value of the property would go to $13 million when it's done. So they would receive the tax grant based on that $13 million amount right now. but just on the improvements. There'd be no tax incentive on just the property sitting there as is. Like I said, if anything, it'd be a drain. They'd have to pay taxes on it because it'd go off from being nonprofit to in private ownership.
All right, any other questions for Scott?
And does the board want to hear anything regarding the more details about the project itself? I know Mr. Weaver's here.
Yeah, I was going to invite Britt up if he wanted to speak.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
So the project, the real crux of it is, it's a historic project. We've gone through a pretty lengthy process to obtain our tax credit equity, federal, state level, the monument status with the county and the city. And our challenge ongoing is, with a historic project, it's going to cost you X. Our budget's roughly $19–20 million, and as you've heard, the end game is $13 million in value. So we work under the HUD 221D4 program for historic projects, and the idea of the projects is to be a catalyst to the area they serve. And fortunately for us in Salisbury, Rowan County, we're not the first thing, but we're the beneficiaries of a lot of foresight and thinking. End game is this, though. We've been doing BPI. We've been working for since 2016 to make this project happen. The commitments we have, just to allay all concerns of us getting a free look or anything of that nature, is we're now paying half the mortgage of the property, and we don't get that money back if we don't do this deal. So I have an ongoing incentive to ensure that we get the deal done. My challenge is I do what's called a financial gap analysis and review it about every 2 weeks. And the gist here is my underwriter will take me forward back to HUD once they can say with confidence that we have the financial capital stack in place that HUD would approve, and they want to be very certain. So at this point, we've narrowed, and now we're just fine-tuning to find things that we can do. I will just note, I do not rely on grants from the government. So when I receive something from the city, county, federal government, it goes to my budget, but only once I have it. So for example, on the governor's budget for the $1 million, I don't have it in my number. If I get it, it's gravy. It makes this job a lot easier. But every little bit matters, and we're getting toward the finish line. So I hope we can get the county support beyond what you've already done for us, which has been a lot.
All right. Thank you, Brett. Any questions for Mr. Weaver? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, like our last agenda item, we will open the floor for a public hearing and public comment. So if anyone has anything to say about this incentive, then this will be a time to come up and speak. Feel free to. Seeing none, we'll close the floor to public hearing. Oh, sure you can. Yeah, come on up.
Yes. Hi, my name is Evelyn Medina. I live in Faith Road on Rowan County. I own a local shop here in town. I'm also on the board for DSI. And I want to say that to me this sounds like a project of if you build it, they will come. We need our downtown to finish getting rehabilitized. It's like a skeleton in the midst of our beautiful downtown to have this building empty and just tearing itself apart. So I ask on behalf of downtown Salisbury business owners to help us get this done. And let's take this opportunity of having someone that has an interest, BMI that has an interest in growing our downtown, and give them all the support that they need to make this project happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We love Salisbury.
Yes. Come on up. Welcome. Give us your name.
Thank you. My name is Diane Young. I live at 126 East End Street in Salisbury. I am the vice chair of Downtown Salisbury Incorporated, and my husband and I have invested over $2 million in downtown Salisbury up to this point. I'd like to say that putting these projects together is like putting together a puzzle, and there are lots of different pieces. Our O'Ruffty project was complicated enough. What this developer is going through and has been working on is monumentally much more complicated and is going to take every piece of that puzzle to make this project move forward. I understand, members of this commission, that this is a unique request. It's a unique project. But DSI is charged with not only business recruitment, but business retention. And based on a place economics development study done in 2014, each of these apartments will generate over $10,000 in new sales in the downtown district and in our community. So you can project the property value increase for you all and the city. You can project sales tax revenue increase. And what it does, as Ms. Medina pointed out, it helps to retain jobs. Last point for you, my husband and I have 10 apartments right now in downtown Salisbury, and I can tell you that a majority of them are occupied by people moving to the city, not necessarily rearranging the deck furniture and moving from one point of the city to another. So the point that this will bring in new residents, I believe, is a very valid point. So I just ask that you consider this request favorably. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Anyone else? All right, if not, then we'll close the floor to public comment. And commissioners have discussion, or do we have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve this incentive grant.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a problem with trying to help downtown Salisbury. I don't have a problem with trying to get the Empire Hotel done after a decade. What I have a problem with is us writing these special incentives, because what are you going to do when the Bankett building across from the Gateway building starts? He's going to have 4 nice apartments up above that, retail space underneath. If he comes and requests 25% off his taxes, how are we going to tell him no? What are we going to do with the 3 new hotels that's going at Old Betty's Ford Exchange? They come here and they're going to spend $40, $50 million to invest into the county, and they say, I want 25% off for the next 5 years too. I'm bringing jobs, I'm bringing tax base. How are we going to tell them no? So that's my problem, is not trying to help downtown Salisbury. I just don't know that rewriting our incentive program is the way to go about it. You know, it really comes down, it's going to generate, first 5 years, $25,000 in revenues for the county if it's full, if it's all sold out, and then they have those 75 employees. I would just like to see if there's not another way that we can do this and not open the door for other people coming into this county, building projects, hiring people, and saying, well, you know, you wrote an incentive package for them, why can't you write one for me? That's what I have a problem with.
Yeah, Scott, so this level 1, if someone in China Grove or Landis or Kannapolis came with the same thing, as long as they had the $5 million investment, then they would also be eligible. Are we creating something new here that we haven't had before?
I do think there is the potential for somebody to ask for it. Again, it's just human nature. But I do think, again, this is a unique project, and normally we wouldn't take something to the board that doesn't fit what we normally do, what we normally talk about. We just thought this was something that was a little more important. But as far as policies to prevent it, I mean, I think that's something maybe we can try to address and try to tweak. It's not a perfect fit, but just based on what we have to work with, we thought this was the best way to get to where we needed to be. But again, there's nothing to prevent somebody else from coming back later. I mean, but it's up to the board's discretion. And honestly, depending on the nature of the project, we'd have to take it at the EDC level on a case-by-case basis and determine what kind of impact it would have before we would want to try and bring it before the board.
And I think I agree with Craig that when we look at these, we're not looking at it and say, hey, we're doing something for the city of Salisbury, because what we're looking at is the impact over the whole county for all the citizens. And looking at it, if they're going to take something that's not on the tax books and put it on the tax books for a minimum of, of $1 million and then hopefully $13 million, I think that's good for all the tax payers. The only thing I don't, if someone else would show up and have something similar, I mean, you would automatically bring it to us, or you're going to, I guess kind of my question is, if someone else came with the same project, or, are we going to start doing that? And I don't really have a problem if it's going to have the same results, that we're going to take, things that aren't being taxed and create $13 million worth of taxable income. It's just, I'm like Craig, I just don't like the perception that we're creating something new here for a specific group. I just want something that's going to be out there for everybody to use throughout the county. And so you're saying if other people brought something very similar, then you would probably bring that to us also.
Well, if it was similar to this, with this type of economic impact, if we're talking like, $10, $12 million, then I think we'd have to, strongly consider taking it before the board. But I think that for something that would be on a smaller scale, I'm not quite sure, and we're trying to be fair, don't get us wrong, but something on a smaller scale, I think it would be, it'd probably have to take some studying before we decide if we want to take it to the board for a standard incentive. And maybe the option long term is to talk about special projects gathering special types of incentives. But for right now, again, we just thought this was the best way to try to get this request in front of the board. But we do again understand it's a unique request, and there is the potential for future requests like this. But I think if we were to see future requests that would bring in another $10 or $12 million, I think that would be something we could all get behind. But again, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
What is the niche here? Is it the jobs issue? Because they're putting $19 or $20 million into a facility, so it certainly meets our level 1 grant. Is it that, what is it? What's the niche here?
The statute's redefined economic benefit under that, and so I think it's lessened the burden on the number of jobs. We don't have a minimum number of jobs in the current program. The minimum threshold is the investment amount, $5 million, and that qualifies you for consideration in the program, whether it's 1 job or 100 jobs.
This really isn't a
and
niche,
so
is
the
it?
legislature sort of redefined the economic benefit a few years ago under that statute to include general economic benefits to the community. And so I think that did kind of lessen. But the baseline answer to that is over $5 million of investment automatically qualifies you for consideration in the program. Then it's about whether they bring it to you based on whether there's a real net positive impact of jobs, even though there's no minimum requirement for that. I think that's what I hear Scott saying, is they would review the projects and determine whether they support bringing it to you or whether it just comes to you without a recommendation. But
well, I guess I don't know, I guess it's still Southern Power plant out there. When we had incentives for that, there wasn't a lot of jobs, but it was hundreds of millions of dollars. So, like I said, and I'll support this. I don't have a problem supporting it, but I would like, maybe for you guys to work on maybe something that we could have in also for something future like this that would fit a little bit better, and maybe something we could think about, because some of these other counties or towns are trying to develop. If we have something specifically for this sort of thing, may bring in more investors in some of our other areas too. I know that I guess this one's been closed since '63, so we really like to get something in there. But I would like to have something like maybe more formalized for us as a board to look at in the future.
More formal policy for unique projects like this, yeah. And normally we typically do manufacturing and distribution. That's kind of our bread and butter. But we just again recognize this was a unique project and something that's. I know there was a chance for this project or a similar project in this same facility to go through about 10 years ago. Then the recession happened, and we just really thought that the timing was as good as it's going to get to try and push this thing forward. And special project, and not just benefit to the downtown, but the retail stuff, the new apartments downtown. It has a lot of, I don't want to say little in a bad way, but a lot of little things that add up to us one big project, one potential big impact. But yeah, I think we'd have to study the future ones because I don't know if we want to get into incentivizing retail on a larger scale. You get a new shopping mall. I don't know if the board wants to consider something like that or not. It's certainly something we need to talk about privately and also publicly. But for the time being, we just thought this project needed a nudge. Anything we can do to help, we thought we would try. But we recognize it's a unique circumstance, a unique request, and we're sorry for any confusion it may generate, but we just thought it was important to bring this to the board to talk about. So.
Well, let me ask you, so from what I gathered from this, the retail part was just some more information that you gave that was from a study the city did. We're doing our incentive off of the increase to $13 million worth of taxable property.
Correct.
So the retail, those 75 retail jobs, they come or don't come, has nothing to do with our incentive. Our incentive is on increasing the value of property.
Yeah, that's correct. We just thought we'd bring these up as more, or other benefits to the project. I mean, the sales tax revenue, the jobs, increased population downtown. And we thought all these things were important for the board to at least consider when making their decision. But yeah, you're right. The main focus is the tax incentives and the growth to the tax base for this project.
Good question. All right, any other discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. Britt, start swinging a hammer or something. Thank you. I had someone that I was talking to recently about, local contractors. I'm not really, I know you're the developer, you're not the builder. So I know there's, we'd really be interested in knowing how that process of selecting local subcontractors works and to get as much benefit for the local folks as possible when construction starts. Maybe that's a conversation we can have. Okay, all right. Thanks for being here. All right, Aaron, Mr. Poplin, public hearing for Z06-19.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got a request Z06-19 from Francisco Ortiz, requesting a rezoning of his 8.35 acre parcel, tax parcel 408086, from 85ED2 to CBI. And this property is located at the 1000 block of Chuck Taylor Lane, which is right there where Peeler Road had that realignment a few years back. If we take a look at the land use plan, it's located in the industrial corridor of 85 and 29 in the Eastern Land Use Plan. And in that area, it recommends infill development. And this site on Chuck Taylor Lane is one of only 3 vacant parcels on that current lane, with the other 2 ones being owned by the businesses that already have spaces there. So if we take a look at the zoning in the area, this is part of a 12-acre 85ED2 tract that's kind of isolated by itself. And then it adjoins a much larger CBI tract and then an industrial tract to the south of it. With the 85ED2 district, one of the big advantages to have that is it allows for flexible uses through a PUD, planned unit development. However, to do a PUD, you have to have a minimum of 20 acres. So the entire zone district itself is not large enough to have a PUD in it. So if you swap to a CBI zoning, it would actually open up the allowed uses and be a little bit more flexible for somebody to develop it. And then if we take a look, the request is for the 8.35 acre parcel here, but we've talked to the planning board and talked to Duke, and they're fine with adding their parcel right here to the south of it to just get rid of that district entirely and go with a full CBI. So if we take a look around the area, we can see we got Taylor Clay down here. We got some other industrial uses there, and then a neighborhood kind of right here off of Peeler Road. And then back in June, we had the planning board meeting on this, and they adopted the 2 following statements of reasonableness and consistency. And then, like I said, they recommended adding the Duke Energy substation to this rezoning request. And then as far as procedures go, we need to conduct a public hearing, adopt statements of reasonableness and consistency, and then approve, deny, or table the request. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
So if we approve this, we're going to also ask that we add the adjoining 3.2 acres to it?
That's correct.
As part of the request, okay. All right, questions for Aaron? All right, if not, then we'll have a public hearing now on this item. If anyone is here that would like to talk about this rezoning, this would be a good time to come up and speak. Just give your name, your address, and your comments. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, what we'll need is on page, let's see, page 9 of 10, we have a statement of reasonableness. I'll read this. Statement of reasonableness Z06-19 is reasonable because it's adjacent to a CBI district. The parcel is too small to be developed as a planned unit development, and CBI is a better transitional district to the adjacent RR district. So I make that in the form of a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Then statement of consistency, Z06-19 is consistent, and CBI is appropriate zoning due to the adjacency of the existing CBI district and due to the CBI being a better transitional district from RR. And make that in form of motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And so then do we have a motion to approve Z-0619, which includes the adjoining 3.2 acres, parcel number 408409?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. Ed, welcome.
Good evening. When the planning board originally began study of these amendments, the intent was to create an option for increasing, if not maintaining, development densities in our water supply watershed areas, and specifically at the Old Beatty Ford Road area, which is the Coldwater Creek and Lake Fisher watershed. Although there's a scheduled annexation for that area that's imminent, we tend to think that these amendments that we spent quite a bit of time on offer some value in the other watershed areas, and especially the WS4 areas. And so as we studied the process of allowing high-density development in our watershed areas, they created amendments to the subdivision text amendment and the zoning text amendment as well. And that's what I'm going to be very brief. There's a lot of material, but I think I can highlight the things that are probably more salient to the consideration of the board. But if you do have any specific questions, please do stop and ask. So there are 10 watersheds in Rowan County. These comprise about 240 square miles of the county. The ones that we're talking about tonight are only the ones in brown. You see the sticky note up there. They apply only to the WS4 watershed areas. Starting at the north, that's the South Yadkin River, the Yadkin River watershed, Tuckertown. Again, I mentioned Coldwater Creek earlier, and Flat Rock Branch, which is there between 153 and 152, just west of Landis. And so again, these rules that we're talking about tonight would only apply to projects in the WS4 watershed areas. We put together about 16 new terms. They didn't really come from us in as much as they came from the North Carolina Administrative Code. These that you see here are proposed to be included in both the subdivision and the zoning ordinance, starting with curb outlet system all the way down to a vegetated setback. So what really changed in the zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance? In my mind, these are the substantive changes that were proposed by the planning board and ultimately approved by the planning board as well for consideration by this commission. Starting with the subdivision ordinance, there's the idea that we would utilize a third-party consultant to review all stormwater control measures, and the cost of that review would be applied to the application. The subdivision review committee will review any stormwater control measure submittals. This would be even if they are not part of the subdivision ordinance. That committee is more technical in nature, and they would receive these proposals. They do similar things when they look at plats, road plans, water point source, those kind of things. We also included the SCM design criteria. By and large, this is specified by the Division of Environmental Quality at the state level. And then we have the operation and maintenance, as well as an inspection process that happens annually, as well as for reconstruction of any damage that may occur. Yes, sir.
So the retention of the consultant, so that you said that's new. Have y'all been doing that?
We have not. We do not actually have this in place yet. Where stormwater control measures are in place in the county, they are designed by an engineer and they are submitted to the state for review in these Phase 2 stormwater areas. We do not have any involvement with them at this point. We asked if the state would review these for us, but they will not. This is something that once amended becomes delegated to the county, and we are responsible for it at that point. At this time, we don't have an engineer on staff, so we would have to, because of the increased development opportunity, pass that cost back along to the applicant, unfortunately. So in the zoning ordinance, under the low density standards, the state amended their rules in 2018, and they have this idea of non-point source and stormwater pollution control requirements for low density projects. Really what this means is that either through a vegetated conveyance or a curb outlet system, low density projects are going to deal with their stormwater that they create. And those are just fancy terms for grass line ditches or a curb and gutter system that allows their stormwater to convey into grass swales, something of that nature. That was a required amendment that would have had to have happened at some point just because the state updated their rules. Here's where this all applies. The high density standards apply only again in the WS4 watersheds, and it's applicable to projects that exceed the low density standard. Only when a project is going to exceed the low density standard. In a major subdivision, that would mean that there's a high likelihood that they're going to be where we have municipal water and sewer, because they can't really exceed the low density standards with well and septic tanks. Exceeding it means they're going to have a lot smaller lot size. If they're going to have a planned development subdivision, Commissioner Pierce and I talked at length about this seemingly for years, about the old Beatty Ford Road project and what they were going to do and how their project didn't really fit in a lot of what we do traditionally from a zoning standpoint, but the planned development subdivision offers residential, mixed use, commercial, things of that nature. So if a project is going to be a major subdivision, a planned development subdivision, or is going to be cited in one of our development nodes, not development code, but development node or a corridor, and proposes more than 3 acres of impervious cover. So this is a pretty big site. This is not a race shop that's in Mooresville that you typically see come in for an SNIA permit. This is going to be somebody that's actually doing a pretty big area. These are the folks that are going to want this type of project as well. They're going to ask you, hey, we need to be able to do this to turn the project. So we've heard about obstacles to overcome. Stream buffers, we already require a 30-foot stream buffer for low-density projects. The rules were updated sometime over the last year or so, but there's a 100-foot setback along perennial streams that apply to the high-density projects, so we'll need to include that. And then the high-density applications are going to be considered by the commission. And this is something I apologize. I just noticed earlier today that if the board is approving these applications, the text that was in this one particular section of the zoning ordinance in a lot of ways duplicated the process that the subdivision review committee was already going to manage. And so as I looked at this, what I would encourage the board to do, and I'm not a big fan of this, but I will tell you that in our notices that we publish, that we tell the public that there are changes that may happen as a result of the public hearing or input. And so I'm kind of taking a mulligan here and telling you that what I would say is that if the Board of Commissioners approves a high-density development permit, it shall then forward that to the subdivision review committee pursuant to that review section that I hinted at earlier. All this stuff that talks about the maintenance agreement, a copy of the plan, that all happens anyway. It really just confuses the matter, and I think it's kind of a chicken or the egg effect. And what we would like to tell people is that if they want to pursue the high density project, they come before the board, they get approval, the board kind of vets all the issues that are associated with the application, and then it gets sent to the subdivision review committee for the technical aspects of it. Yes, sir.
Ed, let me ask you, in most cases, though, if it's going to be a high-density development, it's probably going to be in a municipality where there's infrastructure.
Well, it may, and we wouldn't deal with it at that point, but I tend to think that a lot of what happens in and adjacent to Old Beatty Ford Road may also have the benefit of tapping into their municipal water and sewer, and so they may be eligible, and then we would be looking at it on those. I will say this, that we put a lot of time and effort into this, and for that project to go away, I think having this in our ordinance, it probably won't get used a whole lot, but there is still value in it. We know that the state gave us an informal approval, and so I would hate to say that we don't go ahead and proceed with this while we advertise and that we've done all the work and we're ready for it. The other thing that very well may be happen or could happen is that we could make this also applicable in these WS2 areas as well. As I said, we've got 240 square miles of our county that's in a watershed that at some point, the low density option that everybody has operated under for these SNIA permits, excuse me, they're going to have to go to high density. I mean, it's going to be a run of the mill. I don't think it's next week or next year, but it will be something that somebody will pursue at some point. So,
well, the point I was trying to make, this is a good standard for the municipalities to go by, that if the county has passed this requiring these particular requirements, that this would just kind of go right along with what they would need to do.
in China Grove, I think adopted something very similar last year.
Okay.
Yeah. So where are we at this point? I mentioned this earlier. The draft text were deemed acceptable by Department of Environmental Quality. The Planning Board also unanimously recommends adoption of the proposed text amendment with this statement of consistency. STA 0118 and ZTA 0418 are consistent with each of the adopted Rowan County land use plans, and that's being all three of them, through utilization of property and retention measures, and furthermore, the amendments meet North Carolina guidelines. I know that's quick. There's a lot of material. I'll be glad to answer any other questions that you may have.
Any consultation with Kannapolis through this process?
Not directly about this, but my general feeling is that they have something like this in place, and they've had it for quite a while. The ball field is in a critical area down there, and so to be able to do anything beyond the low density standards, you've got to have something like this. I don't even think the ball stadium could have been developed under the low density standards. So they've probably had something since 1994 in some way, shape, or form.
All right, anything for Ed? I know this was pretty dry reading.
For a wet topic, it is pretty dry. It sure is. Yeah.
See what you did there. I like it. Here, come gavel us in for that.
Thanks.
All right, if we don't have any other questions for Ed, then we will go to a public hearing. So we'll open the floor for public comment. Some of the legal things we have to do. Does anyone want to talk on this? All right, if not, then we'll close the floor. And
Mr. Chair, could I make
yes,
one comment? If you or the board elects to adopt these, please, with that revision that I noted in that one section, with that one amendment, which is there.
What page is that on? Got it covered up.
Page 124 of the Rowan County zoning ordinance. There.
But it's not in our stuff here.
It's not.
Okay.
No, sir, it's not. That's why I said
Do we need to read that into the motion?
Yes, sir. That would be great if you would.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right, so let's see, I'll make a motion that we approve the statement of consistency, STA 01-18 and ZTA 04-18 are consistent with each of the adopted Rowan County land use plans through utilization of property and retention measures. Furthermore, the amendments meet North Carolina's guidelines. Do we have a second for that? All right, any discussion? And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
So then do we have a motion to approve STA 01-14 and ZTA 04-118 with the changes described in paragraph B? If approved by the board, a high-density development permit shall be issued after the applicant posts a performance bond or other acceptable security as required in section. No?
The yellow is to be eliminated.
Oh, eliminated?
Yes.
I thought this was revised. The wording was revised.
I'm sorry, the italicized portion is what I would ask you to include as
Okay.
opposed to
All right.
the yellow.
If approved by the board, a high-density development permit shall be forwarded to the Subdivision Review Committee, SRC, for review pursuant to Section 22-56 of the Rowan County Subdivision Ordinance. Will that work?
Thank you,
All
sir.
right. Thank you very much. All right, we have a motion and a second. Surely no questions about all this. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. And Ed, please pass our thanks along to the planning board for their work on this. All right, Shane, quasi-judicial hearing for CUP 0-19, and I have a speech that I have to read. The hearing for consideration of CUP 01-19 is now in session and will focus on an application submitted by Jim LePan on behalf of Verizon Wireless to construct a 199-foot wireless support structure on tax parcel 367-00401, located at the corner of St. Peter's Church Road and Hill Road. If you feel that any member of the board may have a conflict of interest in hearing the case, please address the board now prior to any testimony or information being presented. When the board enters into deliberations to decide the case, no further testimony may be presented. The board will render one of the following three decisions. One, will approve the permit as requested or with additional conditions. Two, continue the request, or three, deny the request. All parties who plan to testify in this case may come forward and be sworn in. Those who testify must state their name and address at the podium for the benefit of the board's clerk. All material presented must be given to the clerk and will become part of the record. This board can only accept sworn testimony. No hearsay evidence is admissible. And Shane, whenever you're ready.
Shane Stewart, Rowan County Planning Office, 402 North Main, Salisbury. So the application here before you this evening comes to you from Falcon Foster for Verizon Wireless on the property owned by Gregory Cooper at St. Peter's Church Road and Hill Road. If you take a look at the map here, you'll see the property outlined in black. It is due east of the town of Rockwell's ETJ. And looking at a 2018 photo. So this is the Cooper property, totals 47 acres, and this red X is the proposed location for a 195-foot monopole tower on the northwest corner of that tract. So from there, we take a step back and kind of start with, it's not really a search ring, it's a search boundary. This area in blue here is from the applicant, and within that area they're charged with, by our ordinance, finding existing towers, alternative structures, or what we call preferred sites, which are generally the public or semi-public owned property to look at. Obviously there's no towers in this location here, but there are, one's actually barely outside the boundary, but there are 3 transmission tower structures that are approximately 116 feet tall. So with that information there, that's the only thing that meets the criteria for any type of analysis of sorts. I should also indicate, just to give you an idea, this blue area is about 210 acres, so it's relatively small. It's probably, or I should say roughly about a mile long and about 2,000 feet wide. Give you perspective. So you don't really need to focus on this too much, but they did.
So will you go back? Those are 3 other towers that are there?
They are transmission towers. Okay. So the the large high voltage lines that come through. Gotcha. You can kind of see the clearing here. There's actually multiple other risers through there, but those are the ones closest to the study area. And I should point out too, the thumb here is obviously the proposed location.
That wasn't a giant thumbtack?
Exactly. So this would be from the applicant a potential coverage area if A, B, C, and D were actually the built coverage at the assumed height of that tower and a lot of other assumptions, but effectively this just is information that they studied it and it does not meet the desired coverage needs. And jumping ahead of myself a little bit, but the consultant that the county hires on behalf of the tower review too concurred with those findings that they believed it was not sufficient compared to what they would get with the proposal. All right, here are the nearest towers to our site with the approximate distances between each. And you see, I just picked the central point of that search area. Verizon actually has a presence on both of these towers here, so that's a moot point. But both of these are over 2 miles away, and again, not sufficient, or within that search area and had to be studied. Here is a snippet of the site plan that provides the boundary of the tract. You also see the area here, the engineered fall zone, which we'll zoom in on that a little bit. It's probably the meat of the site plan for the benefit of this meeting. There's actually an existing drive connection here. The property was timbered maybe about a year and a half ago. So an existing drive would be used for this location. Already has a driveway permit too for the requested location. But the tower itself would be located here within a fenced complex, and the overall ring here you see around it is an engineered fall zone. Should the tower fall, the PE certifies that it would be within that area and be on the lease area, the subject property, not fall on any adjoining land or the road right-of-way, which, if you notice, is pretty close to the road. It's 113 feet away, but doing the math, it's obviously 13 feet away from the edge of the right-of-way. And a few more pieces that more specific to the details. This is the proposed monopole design tower, galvanized steel gray in color. 195 would be the overall tower height. It does have a 4-foot lightning rod that's not counted in the height. On the lower, you see the fenced compound here. This would be when additional carriers come on to co-locate, which there's a proposal for 4 more to accommodate the ordinance requirement, that the cabinetry would be located in here. The applicant is proposing to screen that with some fabric and also, at staff's request, some evergreens around. We know we're not going to screen the tower, but you still have the base foot complex here. 10 feet on center. At some point, probably 15 years from now, you'll have a decent screen for that base. All right. So with our colors here, just to start off with that, you're looking at existing tower locations, presence Verizon Wireless has. The green is the best coverage, and it dissipates over to the yellow, which would be the least desired coverage. So that's the color range, and the proposed tower will populate that new coverage area like this and fill in that gap. So what we looked at earlier with the 4 was the same thing with those 4 towers as alternatives relative to the proposal. And again, this meets that desired objective. A few pictures around the site. The top left is looking from the road right into the site. The tower will be proposed here. I will say it will have excellent visibility from the road. There's nothing blocking it. You will see it. There's no hiding it. And right on the northwest of the property, you see the Dearth residence. I believe it's about 280 feet away. It's 285 feet away, so it's by far the closest. There's another home on the back side of Hill Road that you can see. The rest, I would defer to the aerials, and we'll see those in a little bit here in a second. And then the bottom photo is just the north and south view. Currently has corn on the site. There's a couple residences up here that will have a pretty good view too as well. And this is Hill Road. This is probably the best information on the view of what you'll have. On the right hand of the screen, I'll have a red circle where the simulation is taken from. There's a picture taken of the existing environment with the simulation of the proposed tower to give you an idea of what this would look like once built. So from this point, you're looking straight from St. Peter's Church into the tower, that approximate 113 feet off the edge of the right-of-way. And as we move up, this is the backside on Hill Road looking back towards St. Peter's Church. There is some trees that were left that were not part of the removal, but it's, as you see, kind of minimal. Coming back over here to Liberty Road, you really can't tell. And compared to the existing power poles, really inconsequential there. From the lower side going south, looking back north, you see the tower here. Also over on Lincoln Road. And at the bridge on St. Peter's Church. This is an addendum. You have it in your packet, the cityscape analysis that they concurred with the findings of the applicant that it meets the ordinance standards and all the details submitted. This addendum was to address the alternatives A, B, C, and D that did not make it in time for the packet. And you can see this was updated the 16th. Just supplemental only, but conclusion's the same. There's really not any recommendations from the land use plan for towers, but for what it's worth, it's in Area 1 of the Eastern Plan. As far as notice, the typical within 100 feet of the property, this would be the owners that received the letter, posted a sign on the property the day after. And the applicant also had a community input meeting themselves that they proposed on the 16th of July at the Rockwell Civic Building, and no one attended. Staff received one call just from an interested party, and that's all the inquiries that we had. Procedurally, we do the findings of fact, 3 separate motions. I do have some example findings for the board's consideration here. And lastly, a motion to approve, deny, or table. Well, that shows pretty decent, but for better reading, page 4 and 5 of the staff report, 8 conditions. Applicant has these. I don't believe there's any objections to it, but a lot of these are just referencing back to the material presented. And any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
So our understanding is this is there's towers that communicate with one another, but the additional data that continues to be generated and increased is requiring an additional tower, or else other towers and those getting service off those towers will begin to see increasingly decreasing service. Is that right?
Seems like probably the best that I've heard is before you would have tall towers that kind of broadcast over a coverage area, and we kind of were covered, but as it comes in, this may not be the best explanation, but at any rate, the more the demand and all the things we're using these devices for, there's need to have more infill towers. You probably will see from another carrier more that comes in as well from their needs, and you're seeing that even 2 miles away is not sufficient to use. So they may have a better explanation, but all the demand for data and et cetera, everybody's using these devices now, and I mean, you saw the area of coverage. It may be marginal, but these will make it to where it's reliable.
All right, any other questions for Shane? All right, if not, then if the applicants have anything they'd like to add.
Good evening. Yes, my name is Jim LePan. I'm going to try to keep my comments down below 4 hours tonight, just so we can keep this moving along. I work for Falk and Foster, and I am a zoning specialist. And I am here tonight to talk briefly in support of the Verizon Wireless application. I would like to first make sure that all of the submittals that we sent to Mr. Stewart are considered part of the record here tonight. And is that accurate? We've sent a lot of materials. Yeah, yes, it is. Okay, thank you, sir. Because one of the important reasons for that is that in the ordinance it states that towers are allowed in this zone as long as we comply with every aspect of 21-60, the conditional use requirements, and particularly subdivision 3 of that, which pertains to towers, cell towers. So it's okay we can put a tower in any zone as long as we comply with all the requirements, and that we have tried very hard to do that. And I would submit to you that we did respond to the very vigorous advocacy by both Shane Stewart and Cityscape, who both asked us tremendous number of questions, and we complied with every question. And it's my understanding that from reviewing the Cityscape report, that they affirmatively stated that we had complied with all aspects of the application. I submit to you that as far as submitting the application goes, we have complied with all aspects of that. But just because we've complied with those aspects doesn't mean that we're going to be allowed to put the tower up. That is the board's decision whether we can do that or not. And there are 6 evaluation criteria that the board will use, and there are 3 main questions that will be decided. And so I want to just real briefly go through those 6 criteria and the 3 findings to suggest how we have met all of those. In making your decision to decide whether you're going to approve this tower, it's in 21-59, the evaluation criteria. The first is there adequate transportation access to the site? And as you saw, it's close to the roadway, so yes, there would be. There's an entrance right off the road. Number 2, the use has to not significantly detract from the character of the surrounding area. Should we be making an application for a mining operation or an asphalt manufacturing or slaughterhouse or a junkyard or something like that? I would submit that yes, we would be significantly detract from the character of the surrounding area. But what we're asking for is a single pole to be erected and to stand there, much like the large electric transmission lines that are less than a mile away from this proposed site. Just like those are important for all the people in this region to get electricity, so is this site necessary to be able to have safe and efficient cell service. So I submit to you that the use will not significantly detract from the character of the surrounding area. The third evaluation criteria is that you have to determine that hazardous safety conditions will not result. One of the important aspects of safety is if the tower were to fall, then is anybody likely to be injured by that? It would have to be an extreme weather condition, like an ice storm or something like that with very high winds. So it's our job to prove that no one would be injured in that case. And we have leased the entire fall zone area. And the engineers have identified that it can and will fall within 100 feet. One of the requirements that's the potential conditions is that before we get our building permit, that we will provide, number 3, prior to permitting, applicant shall provide certification by a North Carolina professional engineer documenting, number 1, the fall zone limits within the subject parcel boundary and outside the assumed right-of-way width. Number 2, compliance with the regulations. And that 3, it's designed to accommodate a total of 5 carriers. Verizon Wireless can and will provide that information. We will order the tower. We will get the tower manufacturer to certify all of those things. That's what they do every day is they build towers. They'll be able to tell us very, very certainly that it's not going to be dangerous. Also, as far as safety goes, there's also the issue of safety through improved cell service. Before this meeting, I was talking with some of the members of the fire department who indicated that they and their own residents are not able to use a cell phone if there's some emergency comes up, and that is a very critical thing. The Federal Communications Commission has indicated that over 70% of 911 calls come from cell phones. People are in their homes or traveling on the road. We're going to improve the safety of this area tremendously by adding this tower. Number 4, the use will not generate significant noise, odor, glare, or dust. After it's built, it's just going to stand there. Nothing happening with those. Number 5, excessive traffic or parking problems will not result. True. Every once in a while, a truck will drive up and make sure everything's all right. Number 6, The use will not create significant visual impacts for adjoining properties or passerbys. This, as I alluded to earlier, just as the very heavy-duty electric transmissions towers that were shown in some of the photos are close to the road and go right through this residential area, so too will this be in that area, but it's not going to significantly create a significant visual impact. In the discussion that Mr. Stewart photo from Hill Road, which is, if the roads go like this and we're in this corner, this is is it St. Peter's Church? St. Peter's Church Road goes like north and south, and Hill Road goes east and west. There is a line of trees along Hill Road, and it goes down significantly just past that corner. So if you're 200 yards away from the corner with St. Peter's Church Road, you're not going to be able to see a thing. So I would suggest that it's in a pretty good spot. The three findings are, number one, that the development of the property in accordance with the proposed conditions will not materially endanger the public health or safety. And I have mentioned that. It's going to fall within land that Verizon controls, and it's going to improve the safety. I'm going to speak now of the third condition, which is that, I have it here somewhere. Excuse me for a second. That the location and character of the development in accordance with the proposed conditions will be in general harmony in the area that's located and in general conformity with any adopted county plans. As I indicated earlier, the ordinance that the county passed states that as long as the conditions are all met, that this is something that is possible to be put in any zone, and so therefore I submit that the county has in effect saying that, you know, if it's allowed in that zone, then it's okay to put it in the zone as long as it meets all the requirements. And at any rate, the last finding is one that I can't speak to. I don't have any knowledge of it or qualifications for it, and that's the second finding. And that is that the development of the property in accordance with the proposed conditions will not substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting property, or that the development is a public necessity. I'm going to introduce Michael Berkowitz, who is a very experienced appraiser who I believe has spoken before this board in the past, and he will come and give a review of the report, which is already in the record that I've already submitted, of the valuation impact of this particular tower. Michael.
Thank you. My name is Michael Berkowitz. My address is 1100 Sundance Drive, Concord, North Carolina. I've been a certified general appraiser for 16 years. I've done a lot of work in Rowan County, including downtown Salisbury, right down the street. This is more in a rural area. The findings that I provided in that report were that I provided match pairs of other similarly located towers in rural areas, especially with above-ground infrastructure. The idea of harmony and danger to the nature of the neighborhood all kind of combines together. And looking at whether you would adjust adjacent or abutting properties. As you saw in some of the photos, there's above-ground infrastructure along St. Peter's Church Road. Also, that in concert with the evidence that I provided in the report through a match pair analysis, it is my professional opinion that this proposed tower, as proposed, will not substantially injure the value of adjacent or abutting properties. I would also consider it in harmony, as well as consistent with other above-ground infrastructures in the area, as you saw in the photos that were provided by the planning department, which is very helpful. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On behalf of the applicant, I respectfully request that you approve this conditional use permit, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so We are in a quasi-judicial hearing right now, so what we'll do is open up the floor to any of the public who have comments about this request. Anyone want to speak on this request? All right. Anything further from you all? No? Okay. All right, then we'll close the hearing. And commissioners, we have findings of fact, but also on page 4 and 5, when we make our motion, we would make a motion with 8 conditions found on page 4 and 5. Shane, would you need us to read those, or can we just read into the record that the 8 conditions found on page 4 and 5 be included?
I think it's probably safe just to reference the staff report as long as the findings were read.
All right. All right, then I'll offer up does anyone else want to? No? All right, I'll offer up the findings of fact. The development of the property in accordance with the proposed conditions will not materially endanger the public health or safety. Fact, based on the plan submitted and established conditions of approval, the proposed tower will comply with all applicable federal, state, and local regulations. Fact, it is unlikely, in the unlikely event of tower failure, the structure will be certified by a North Carolina professional engineer to fall within the lease area prior to the issuance of a zoning permit. Fact, the proposed tower will provide the means for Verizon Wireless to address documented coverage and capacity deficiencies and co-location opportunities for future telecommunication providers and industry recognized as a public necessity. So I make that in the form of a motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Finding number 2, that the development of the property in accordance with the proposed conditions will not substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting property, or that the development is a public necessity. Fact, the North Carolina State Certified General Appraiser Michael Berkowitz provided testimony summarizing statements from his impact study, which concluded the proposed tower will not substantially injure the values of adjacent or abutting properties. I make that in the form of a motion.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then I make in the form of a motion that the location and character of the development in accordance with the proposed conditions will be in general harmony with the area in which it is located and in general conformity with any adopted county plans. Fact, according to staff report, monopole towers less than 199 feet in height are permitted in 98% of the county zoning jurisdiction, subject to a conditional use permit, a process that assumes the use is generally compatible with surrounding properties. Fact, wireless towers do not generate significant noise, levels of noise, odor, glare, or dust. Fact, this request complies with all specific conditional use requirements in section 21-63 of the zoning ordinance. In fact, proposed evergreen screen will reduce visual impacts associated with the ground equipment. And finally, fact, as evidenced by photo simulations, a proposed tower would primarily be visible along St. Peter's Church Road and sections of Hill Road.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, then offer up as a motion, we pass CUP 0-01-19 along with the staff report, the 8 conditions found on page 4 and 5 of the staff report.
Second.
All right, we have a second. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you. Shane, thank you. All right, Shane, quasi-judicial hearing for CUP 02-19 Saw Solar. So if anyone's going to testify on this, come on forward and our clerk will swear you in as I read my very exciting speech. The hearing for consideration of CUP-02-19 is now in session and will focus on an application submitted by Saw Solar LLC to construct 6.9 megawatt solar energy system on part of tax parcels 236-006 and 061 located along the 900 to 1200 block of Saw Road. If you feel that any member of the board may have a conflict of interest of hearing the case, Please address the board now prior to any testimony or information being presented. When the board enters into deliberations to decide the case, no further testimony may be presented. The board will render one of the following three decisions. 1, will approve the permit as requested or with additional conditions. 2, continue the request, or 3, deny the request. All parties who plan to testify in this case may come forward and be sworn in. Those who testify must state their name and address at the podium for the benefit of the board's clerk. All material presented must be given to the clerk and will become part of the record. This board can only accept sworn testimony. No hearsay evidence is admissible. And Shane, welcome back.
Thank you. Shane Stewart, 402 North Main Street, Salisbury. So this request from Sol Solar is on property owned by the Revocable Trust of the Deal family at the 900 to 1200 block of Sol Road. It includes 2 parcels, which the boundary here in black is outlined. And you see it's just outside of the Kannapolis ETJ area. The gray represents rural residential, small area of RA zone, both of which do permit solar facilities subject to this process here. Taking a look at a 2018 aerial photo, there's a combination on the property of pasture land. There's also some agricultural land as well that's has crops. And there's also some forested areas here too. You see a gas pipeline right-of-way that comes through the site, and down to the bottom of the screen is the Irish Buffalo Creek floodplain area, and then some drainage areas through this site back down to the creek. Let's take a look at the site plan here, which you have in your packet, and this is just a small snapshot from it. The intermittent black line is the 151-acre boundary of the 2 properties. There's actually a dividing line between the 2 tracts here. And a little bit closer, you can tell a fence line around the proposed solar facility. It's approximately 50 acres that would be encompassed within that lease. Within this area, you have sort of a location of proposed panel arrays, but we'll talk a little bit more here shortly, but this just gives you the idea. I wouldn't think that these small pockets that don't show panels may not have them when we get closer to a construction phase, should this board approve it. So this is more for illustration, not to totally focus on within that fenced area that there couldn't be some adjustments. Same is true for the access area through the site back over to this other section, including the laydown portions as well. But across from a residence on Sol Road would be the proposed entrance here, which has a driveway permit approved by DOT, the approximate location of the interconnect, and again the service area to this gate here for the facility. All right, so one thing I just mentioned earlier, and this is from the general site notes, subsection A is just the disclaimer. There could be some adjustments inside that fenced boundary. All right, let's take a look at the 2017 pictometry. Again, just gives you a different perspective of the site and some of these features. To try to give as much information you can about what we're seeing in pictures and maps versus that site plan and what the site would ultimately look like. The access point would be here, coming down and through this conservation easement, and then the panel areas are approximately in this area here. Let's look at topo as well, which is one of the main features. Anybody here that knows that area well, when you go down Sol Road, it's dropping down to the creek. As you look over, you'll see this terrain rolling down and then back up. Here's an 830 elevation area here, and it kind of rolls down and then back up, and here's 840. Hopefully provides additional context to these pictures and the map. A lot of pictures, but let's start with the ones that are pretty simple. At the northwest corner of the site, looking back over, is 910 Sol Road, the stables. It's sort of a wedding venue, agricultural barn, etc., on the family property. I believe that's the Wayne family. 1020 Saul Road, the Cobble residence, directly across from proposed access. Sorry, I should point out we're on the west side of Saul Road. This is the northern part. We're going to stay on the west and continue down in these pictures in a counterclockwise, or clockwise manner, I should say. And dropping down below the Cobble residence is the Grimes at 1090. And then the Wayne property has a barn structure. Again, this is headed south on the left side of the photo, across the street from the solar facility. On the east side, 955 Saul Road, Ritchie residence. And this is part of the deal property, but not part of the solar facility. So bear with me as I go through some of these pictures. It hopefully provides a little bit of explanation of what is out there, but to say specifically where these panels would be on these photos is kind of difficult. But beside the Ritchie residence, on this photo, we're looking back into the site. The panels would be off the picture here beyond the photo. They may be located about beyond the tree line in this green area here. As we continue to roll out, they would be behind this wooded area here. That's the part you see in drop off. There's a conservation area through here with a drainage feature. Again, trying to marry that map back to these photos. As we continue to look down, the panels would be beyond this area here and going into the edge of that wooded area in the background. Hopefully that's not more confusing than it was and helpful, but all right, again, the deal property on the left-hand side of the picture, Irvin on the right, looking south down towards the creek, and I don't think you would see any of the panels from this vantage point, but just north of the creek on the deal property, not within the lease area, this is the view looking back in. Just over that knoll would be panels. Going back to the land use plan and some of the other comments, there's a lot more in your packet, but just hitting some highlights. The site is in Area 2, which encourages medium density residential. Doesn't have any specific recommendations for solar facilities, but unlike with the tower requests, maybe a little bit different on the board's take for that and how to incorporate this information. Notice, just like the previous, 100 foot between the boundary of the site, signs posted on the property, and I believe the applicant also sent out notices to adjoining landowners as well. Staff received 3 phone calls, most of which seemed to be more interested about what's proposed, and nothing specific that they were opposed to it, at least on the phone. Same procedure as the previous request. We have some potential conditions for the board to consider here as well that I'll hand out. Again, I skipped a lot of things that you do have in your agenda attachments. Just to pull some of these back into that, there was a reference to anti-reflective coating panels being proposed. So if that is a potential condition the board wants to add, then that ensures that they will provide documentation that the installed panels are as such. 3 was a reference in the evaluation criteria to the noise at 150 feet being non-existent. So that could be something that we don't know where the inverters and transformers are at this point, but if they were not within 150 feet of the property line, then we're addressing a potential concern there.
Why'd you pick 150? Did you do any?
They did.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, that's in the evaluation criteria, a statement that beyond 150, it's, 0, if you will. 4 is they do propose a decommissioning plan. Should the facility no longer be generating solar power. So with that said, there's a lease agreement they'll have with the owners, and we can piggyback on ensuring that executed document references the decommissioning plan.
Do you know the term of this? You know, well, we'll ask them when it comes up. It's fine.
And just lastly, 5, I think our manager fielded some concerns maybe from a project a year and a half ago or so with issues during construction, which we typically at this time we focus on what are the impacts post-construction, but we had some folks that were concerned about dust. It's more of a performance-based issue, but this would allow us and environmental management to encourage them, and maybe they would do that anyway, but at least provides leverage that we can say might want to have a different approach depending on the weather and conditions, and they could even add water to the site if it was warranted. Again, that's probably going to be rare, but it's in there if we needed it. Any questions of the board?
Shane?
Yes, sir.
So the 3 phone calls you had, are they any of the addresses listed in the report? Or do you recall?
You know, they didn't give, I don't recall them giving names. And one asked if kind of a loaded question, should we be concerned? And that's one that, you know, from our standpoint, we really can't address because everybody has a different opinion on what could be a concern. But I think most of the folks here, and you can definitely tell, and if you look back in the site, in the staff report, I referenced distance to nearest residences. And we had pictures of these 2 homes. They have evergreen in front on their property. This has an open view, but 800 plus feet away. This residence as well. I believe this one may have been 940. The ones in the back, there's a combination of existing vegetation on their site, maybe what's on this site remaining outside the lease area. So most were just, once I directed them to the online version of the site plan they can look at, I didn't get any additional feedback.
But you think from Saul Road, now you were talking about the hill in the back, that they're going to be on the other side of that.
You'll still see it, but it's definitely obscured between the combination of topo and the distance. You will see them. The other thing I should have pointed out, I failed to mention that. So just looking at these photos, let me go down some. If it is outside the lease area, then obviously it's still on the deal tract. It's doubtful that would be removed, but if anything is within that lease area, the applicant could remove it during their erosion control plan. So I can't confirm that every tree that you see in this photo will be kept. I mean, this gives you the information of what you see from the road looking back in. The terrain rolls down to a point and then back up and is also 800 plus feet away. I think at the closest point, the panels may be 630 feet from the road. And that's approximate.
You know, in your 6 conditions, we're still fairly new in this whole solar craze, so we don't know what happens at the end of the lease yet, because we hadn't got to the end of at least leases that we're familiar with. So at the end of 20, 30 years, I don't know what it is. You're not up there yet, but shout out, how long is this lease?
It's 30 initial years with 2 5-year extensions that are optionable.
So, you know, you just wonder about what the county and folks are left with at the end of that time. If it's worth them getting that stuff out of there, or what do they do? I just wonder at some point about, performance bonds and stuff, about cleaning it up and restoring it back to, that's stuff we can talk about with them, but we're just at the beginning. Yeah, we're at the beginning phase of this.
I mean, that's the decommissioning plan. Without having the bond or something like that, it's at least, a measure, but.
Yeah. All right, any other questions for Shane? All right, if not, if the applicants would like to speak. Thanks for being here.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Clint Cogburn. My office is 100 North Green Street in Greensboro. I'm an attorney for Cypress Creek, who owns this project, which is Saw Solar LLC. Before we get started, if I could pass out a couple materials for the board's review. So again, my name is Clint Cogburn. I'm an attorney for Cypress Creek Renewables, which is the developer and owner of this project located along Saw Road, better known as Saw Solar LLC. What I've just handed up to you are two different documents. In the spiral bound document, that is the appraisal report of our state license appraiser, Mr. Rich Kirkland, who you'll hear from shortly. I've also handed up in the staple document the sworn affidavit of Mr. Chris Sandifer. Mr. Sandifer is a licensed New York electrical contractor and professional engineer. He also has extensive experience in the solar arena, serving on the Nash County Planning Board for a number of years and actually operating a solar farm on his family land. So he will also be presenting testimony. You'll hear from both of them, and we ask that those documents be included in the record. In addition to Mr. Sandifer and Mr. Kirkland, here with me as well is Shane Shields, who is an associate project developer for Cypress Creek Renewables. He is based out of Asheville, and then they also have an office in Durham, North Carolina. We will attempt to keep our testimony and our remarks brief here. We do want to make sure that we meet all the requirements of the quasi-judicial process. We will make sure that we dot all our I's and cross all our T's, but we also want to be respectful of the board's time. To begin, as staff mentioned, this site is located at 949 Saw Road here in Rowan County. The existing zoning of those two parcels are rural residential and rural agricultural. And in the Rowan County zoning ordinance, a solar energy system or a solar farm here is allowed with the issuance of a conditional use permit in those designations. So the zoning designations for the parcels are proper, and that's why we're before you today asking only for the conditional use permit to be issued. Currently, the use of that property is cattle pasture and woodlands, mainly vacant. So we believe that increasing the tax base, having an operative use there will be of benefit to Rowan County and be something that the county will be proud of. As staff mentioned, the total acreage of the property is about 150 acres, but the actual leased property is approximately 50. And we, based upon the site plan that you've been presented, will comply with all the requirements. The setbacks required in the ordinance are 50 feet from the front, the side, and the rear yard. The site plan that we have presented satisfies those requirements in terms of setback. Before I call up Mr. Shields to speak to you about the project, we will note that we agree with staff that based upon the topography and the natural setback here, being that the proposed panels are approximately 600 feet from Saul Road, and I believe that they are anywhere from 400 to 500 feet from any structure, that this site is tailor-made for a use of this type. There will be minimal view shed, if any, as shown in the slides presented by staff. So we think that this is a site that is tailor-made for this, given the significant amount of setback, the natural buffering already in existence, and we will get into that more with the testimony. So first, to discuss this site more in detail and to also provide you some information about Cypress Creek Renewables, Mr. Shane Shields.
Hello, my name is Shane Shields, 45 Banks Avenue, Asheville, North Carolina. Thanks, board, for having us here tonight. As mentioned, my name is Shane Shields. I'm a project developer with Cypress Creek Renewables. I am the project developer for SAW Solar, so I'm excited to be before you tonight. I personally have worked on probably about 200 solar farms in some form or fashion. I've been the primary project manager for roughly 50. And Cypress Creek Renewables as a company has been involved in over 12 states, fairly national company in terms of sites. We've been involved in placing in service over 2.2 gigawatts of solar farms, which is a nation-leading statistic that not many other firms have been able to accomplish. We've been named one of the top solar developers in the nation each of the last 3 years by Solar Power magazine, and North Carolina is traditionally and still our largest and best market, so we're excited by all the good partnerships that we have throughout this region, and look forward to bringing this one to advancement with you all. In terms of the site plan before you, I think there's been a great overview by both staff and Clint. I won't go into too many specifics, but I do just want to reiterate that we worked early with our engineering team, was involved on this site, which is a treat. Worked very closely with the planning staff to ensure that we were meeting all of the ordinance regulations, and can confirm that we are in compliance with all of those. Rather than reiterate any further information, I'd just ask that you ask me any questions, and I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability. I will also mention and reiterate that we did send out community mailers mimicking a very similar list as the formal notice by the county around the same time as well. I have not heard anything back or, to my knowledge, received any calls. I have not received any voicemails. And then I do want to just briefly touch on the decommissioning question. I'll go ahead and briefly answer that to my ability. It's standard practice for us to have a decommissioning provision in our lease. This lease has that. In addition to that, I believe we submitted a decommissioning plan as part of our application, and so there's sort of two, most importantly, our real estate contractual obligation with our landowner partners, which is our most important contract that we have. That stipulates that the costs and the process will be borne by the project entity, the project owner.
What if you're not in business anymore?
Sure. So the easiest way to answer that is that this project entity, as an entity, will be owned by somebody, right? The great thing about these farms is we have a guaranteed buyer with Duke Energy. We enter into long-term contracts with them, and because you have a guaranteed buyer of that power for a set term, you can almost guarantee that there will be some owner of the project entity. Even if Cypress Creek Renewables, which again, we've had a large amount of success throughout the nation and should be around, even if we were to go bankrupt, you can almost guarantee that there will be somebody owning this project just because there's value in it. And both of those documents stipulate that the cost and the process will be borne by the project owner.
Let me, oh,
I
sorry.
don't hate to say this, I don't mean to be negative. I just kind of don't believe that because we don't know what the future holds. You know, the flux capacitor could actually work.
Sure.
And so you guys are belly up in a matter of 12 months, and then you've got, I don't know what the investment is, but, you know, again, Duke's not going to buy that. So I don't know that there's anything we can do about it, you know. But the reality is we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what the market does in 12 months or 12 years or certainly 30 years. So outside of some big performance bond like we talked about, which is probably not part of what you guys typically do, then I don't know how we can guarantee a cleanup.
Understandable.
Just my opinion.
Let me, so recently I was at a meeting somewhere and the solar panels came up, and I guess the question is there issues with disposing of these things after they're done? Are they toxic? They were saying there was maybe some toxicity in some of these things and there's not really a way to get rid of them yet? Or what's the answer on that?
The panels themselves are not toxic, and in most areas you can dispose of them based on the waste regulations of that area, whether that be part of hazardous waste or as recycling. You know, in California, they're actually starting to implement a recycling program for panels, but we're just not quite there nationwide. It's a pretty big industry actually in Europe right now. There's a good bit of salvage value to the components, but at this time they're generally just disposed of in the landfill. The panels operate as a single state pane of glass, so there's no breakage or seepage or leakage from those panels. So you can just dispose of them like general waste. But hopefully, as you know, again, as you mentioned, we're pretty early on in the lifetime of these solar farms. As the need for disposal of the panels becomes more prevalent throughout the U.S. and our recycling systems and our waste management systems, you know, become more accustomed to this sort of material, there will actually even be a recycling component. That's the hope.
Is your support structure, your beams and your rails, are they aluminum?
Typically aluminum and steel, yeah.
Well, the reason I ask is some of the ones I've looked at here in the county during construction phase, I was impressed with the fact that all the I-beams are made out of aluminum, all your cross rails are, so there's definitely a recyclable situation here if that system has to come down. My biggest concern is I keep seeing so much information about the more efficient panels that are coming out in the near future. Do y'all have plans if that happens to replace the existing panels, or would it be too cost prohibitive to do that?
At this time, we don't plan to, you know, there's, I guess, a term in the industry called repower sites where you swap out the panels to be more efficient. At this time, we don't have any plan for that with this site. You know, based on our design that we currently have, it's really situated to a particular type of racking and panels. So it wouldn't necessarily be advantageous for us to do that. So at this time, there's no plan for that.
Well, the reason I ask is you said you've got a first 30-year lease with two 5-year renewals, and I've got to agree with Chairman Edds. Over the next 40 years, I'm sure there's going to be some advancements in the efficiency of these panels. So I guess what I'm asking is, it's not just the decommission portion, but what about if you upfit?
Right. Yeah, and certainly, you know, there may come a point where we would look into that, and it would be advantageous. And I think we would, you know, come to you guys again and say, what do we need to do to permit this and make this happen? But again, you know, at this time, there's no plans for that.
All right, let's talk about something that maybe you can predict, which is the tree line.
Don't hold me to it.
That Shane referenced. Do you have plans to take down any of the tree line that we saw in the photos?
We don't. I think you can see in our site plan our outer limits of disturbance there. And as part of this, procedure here, we'll be bound by a maximum limits there. From everything we can tell, that's all the area that we'll ever need. Sometimes we do some tree clearing, especially trees that are in the south of sites for solar energy coming in, and it'll create shading. But in this site, the way it's situated, it looks really good from that standpoint. I don't think we'll have much shading concerns. I believe what you're referencing is those along the conservation easement there to the west and north. And so I wouldn't see any need to clear those, except for, there's maybe one or two that's shown within our fence line. Those would be cleared. But outside of that, all of those that you see running south to north and then northeast from there, right beside that conservation easement, we wouldn't, I wouldn't see any need.
Probably can't, can you? In a conservation easement?
Particularly if they're within the bounds of the conservation easement, we can't disturb anything within that. So we actually have just a 60-foot break there for access over that, through that conservation easement where we can, have right of way. But beyond that, we can't disturb anything within that conservation easement.
Anything else? All right, got anyone else coming up?
Thank you.
So yes, our next speaker will be Mr. Chris Sandifer. He'll address and show that the proposed development will not materially endanger the public health and safety. Before I call Mr. Sandifer up, just to summarize, one of the main issues that has come about here is the decommissioning issue. Obviously, there will be a decommissioning component to this in the lease with a plan. We obviously understand that there are concerns there. Those are concerns that come about in many of the jurisdictions that we appear before. A couple things I'll note is Cypress Creek is a market leader in this area. It's a fairly stable company. I obviously know that these leases last decades, so things are subject to change, but I do want to put forward that Cypress Creek has a track record and a presence in North Carolina. Second, if something were to happen, one, there is some inherent value in the panels themselves in terms of recycling and selling those, so the materials themselves do have some value. And finally, and probably most importantly that Mr. Sandifer can touch upon, is that these are low intense and low impact developments, in that what we typically see is people who are a second or third generation in a farming family. You have those people who no longer want to farm the land. They will come engage Cypress Creek. You'll have a solar farm put on there, and at the end of the life cycle of these, the intent is that those can be returned to farming because they are of low impact. You pull up the panels, you have some minor reconstruction, if you will, but it is not a substantial redo of the land. And Mr. Sandifer can talk about that and some of the additional health and safety questions that have come about.
Good evening, Chairman, members of council. My name is Chris Sandifer with office at 3118 Green Road, Spring Hope, North Carolina. Thank you for allowing us to present to you tonight. I will go through some basic design. I know you guys are familiar with solar, but I'll be very brief on that. But I will address the decommissioning while it's on my mind. I have performed decommissioning plans, and I am registered. I'm an electrical contractor in North Carolina, not New York. So I am an electrical contractor as well as engineer in the state of North Carolina. I thought you said New York. So I want to clear that up. And so
that gets you some no votes. So
you wouldn't have guessed that, would you?
I'm kidding.
But I have performed decommissioning plans before, knowing the equipment and the expertise it would take to install as well as remove them. And typically, the material cost on a project like this would be around $10 million, or that would be the install cost. And then the material cost, that would be about half. So it'd be about, for 5 megawatt, it'd be about $5 million of material cost. So that's the aluminum you're talking about, the copper, the transformers, inverters, the panels, and that type thing. And so if you want to take them out and just scrap them and not go to a secondary market, but just take it and say we're going to sell the aluminum for aluminum, we're going to sell the copper for copper, we're going to sell the panels, for the glass and the silicon that make up those, and not any kind of secondary market. Typically, you get it at about 10 cents on the dollar. So you put $1 million of material. So you got $5 million, then you get 10 cents on the dollar, then you'd have $500,000 of salvageable material coming out. And typically, when I've done the estimates on it, it costs about half of that to remove it. So the net value is going to be about $250,000 at today's prices. You say, what's the price of copper going to be, aluminum and steel in 40 years? I don't know. But the thing, what's the labor prices going to be? I don't know. But those types of things typically track. Like most commodities will. So the price of labor goes up, but guess what? So the price of commodities. Just so those, I just wanted to put that out there. For the Harmony portion of it, to get to this point, to get the application into utility, they had to have a certificate of public convenience and necessity. So the Utilities Commission of North Carolina has deemed this project a need for the community. On a site like this, there's very little grading. Typically, I know it's mostly like pasture now. Typically, there would be some roads going in for construction, and you keep going down, there might be a little bit of dust during construction, but typically, they just drive galvanized steel piles into the ground. It's a 150-year-old technology that the North Carolina Department of Transportation uses for your stop signs, for your guardrails, for the utilities use them for light poles, the transmission lines. That might be what that tower is going to be made, that communication tower. There are some that are like that. So mounted to those piles that are pushed into the ground, hydraulically pressed in the ground without disturbing the soil, there would be racks. Those racks are, like you observed, are typically aluminum. They're just easy to drill and they're easy to install. And so they don't have to be. I have seen galvanized, but by the majority of them are I-beam aluminum. And so that's what they attached to those racks. The aluminum racks would be the panels themselves. Typically, the panels come with a 25-year warranty to put out 93, 94% efficiency, depending on the manufacturer, at the end of 25 years. So the output continues to degrade, minuscule, as a small percentage every year. They're not as good as they are, just very much like lights. When you put them, there's a light depreciation factor, there's an output depreciation factor that you have to consider. There is a solar panel recycler in Ohio, First Solar. They're in the process right now. They make solar panels after the tariffs were put in last year. It became economically viable for this company to start up, and they actually provide a lot of panels. I don't know if they'll provide the panels for this, but they do take panels that are damaged during installation, transportation, or whatever, and they're accepting those panels now to recycle. When I say recycle, anything we recycle, but when I say recycle economically. 95% of this panel is economically recyclable. So obviously the aluminum and the copper would be higher than that, but the panel themselves are 95% recycled as compared to a phone, which is less than 50%, or a television or any other electronic equipment, which is less than 50% by weight is recyclable, and these are 95% recyclable. Now, can you
the 5%?
Go ahead.
What's the 5% that's not recyclable?
It's a substrate. It's like it's like the printed circuit boards type. That's the part. The metals, the glass, the silicon, all that. But there are insulation components inside of it that's just not worth.
But they're not toxic.
Oh no! That's what I was going to say. These things can be put in a Class 3 landfill. Same thing, non-hazardous landfill. The same thing that the town's trash goes into. These are.
Do will our landfill take these, Mr. Manager?
I don't know the answer to that. Do they contain any lead?
There could be these are encapsulated in glass, so there's nothing's going to leach out of it. But the connections could have lead solder. Not always do. Sometimes they use silver solder. Mostly that's what they've gone to. But it could be some solder to actual where they make the connections, a little bit of solder. I did a calculation on that one time, so that came up. I don't know if they've ever shot doves out there.
What about sulfuric acid? Do they contain that?
Any what?
Acid?
No, sir. No, sir. This site at this point has no energy storage. They produce it, they sell it.
I don't know the answer to your question.
Say again?
The commissioner asked me if the landfill would take the solar panels, and then I asked the question, do they contain lead? And I think your answer was yes.
Yes.
And then I said, I don't know the answer to the question about whether or not our landfill will take the solar panels.
Well, these panels have passed the acid leach test that the EPA requires, and so they have a test that they've already tested them for, and so the panels pass that test for disposal in a landfill. But that's not what's going to happen to them. They're worth way more than they're already recycling because it's economically viable solution to recycle as opposed to pay a tipping fee to go put them in a landfill. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I still don't know the answer. I mean, whether or not our landfill would take them. So,
well, if they take class 3 waste, and the EPA says that they can put them in there. So they're not toxic, is what I'm trying to tell you.
And that was my original question, because it's great that 95% are recyclable. If the other 5%'s, hazardous waste, then
it's not
you have to
hazardous
balance
waste.
it
It's
out.
just
That's why I was asking you the question.
Right. There's no hazardous waste in it. There is 5% of it is insulation that it's not economically viable to try to make something else out of it. It's just cheaper to put that 5% of the weight in landfill. The rest of it is economically viable to reuse it. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe a newspaper or cardboard. If you get enough of it, it's worth recycling. If it's not, then and the little bit of insulation is there. It's just not worth recycling. So the panels, the output of that is DC, like would be in a battery. They go into an inverter, which is an electronic piece of equipment. You see in the middle of that screen, you'll see a kind of an opening. That looks like where they have, it says the location for the transformer or the equipment pad, or I can't read it, mine's not quite that good, but, and so that, for this one, it looks like they're proposing a single equipment pad, but that's not necessarily, it could be 2. Typically it's 2. Sometimes I've seen as many as 3, but it could be 1 if that's what they decide to do. But typically what you're going to do is put those transformers, that equipment, and you're going to nest it inside of those panels. And you do that because you want to reduce the amount of losses that you have from the panels to the inverter. So if I have to string it an extra 1,000 feet, then I've got losses plus the expense of all the extra wiring. So you put that's a very typical design where you would put the equipment nested inside. So that removes it even further from the property boundary. This one is, the property boundary on here is not going to be an issue, but that's just an example of how that would do. So from the inverter, it converts the DC to AC, which is what we have here that runs the lights that are in this microphone that I'm enjoying right now. And then there's a transformer which matches the voltage to the utility voltage, just like there's a transformer outside here that matches the utility voltage to the 120-volt sockets and the lights, and that's pretty much it. The inverters and the panels are 60s to 70s technology. There's been no studies done whatsoever that show that these cause any kind of negative impact to your health or safety. The transformer is the same that's around this building. They're pad mount transformers. They've been around over 100 years. That's what Westinghouse came up with back in the 19th century, and it became very common. And what's really enabled the electric utilities to provide energy the way they have. So I just want to, I noticed that there is some drainage. If there is some concern, the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality has determined that these panels do not add any impervious surface. So any water, any rain, it'll hit the panels. It just runs off, falls into the grass, and it goes into the ground. It's not impervious surface other than the little pad, and maybe a 10-foot by 10-foot pad or two where the equipment is. And you know, a very small pad would be impervious. And that's pretty much it. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that I could if you have any.
Is this one of the organizations that uses the farm animals to keep the grass down?
There are some. Most of the times, these and I don't know about this one because this was kind of far in the country, but most of the time there are ordinances for pasture animals, and most times these solar farms are near a substation or need to be fairly close so that they can match the voltage. And so most time there are ordinances that they don't allow grazing animals, you know, if they, and so I don't know about this one.
Oh, didn't we have some we approved that had sheep?
One, yeah. They had goats or sheep on it, one or the other.
Got sheep on it,
Deal's probably got enough sheep to do all that himself. I bet as good a businessman as he is, he'll probably charge his rent for putting them back on there.
Well, that might be true. If they're allowed, there are some solar farms that do use sheep. Never a goat, but yeah, sheep.
Goats that end up standing up on top of it.
Oh, they'll tear it all to pieces.
Mr. Chairman, I asked the solid waste director if they could take the panels, and the answer is yes. There's no ban on them per the state. Depending on how many and what type, we may ask for a TCLP test. I'd be happy to speak with the person and walk them through the disposal process. So,
somebody needs to repeat that, please.
I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, speaking of the mic.
there is no ban on them per the state of North Carolina. Depending on how many and what type, we may ask for a TCLP test.
That's the toxic leach characteristic test that I was referring to earlier, the EPA. These panels that will be put in meet that toxic leach test. So it's just basically a speeded up method of deteriorating some equipment. So they grind it up into small pieces and put acid on it. They test it, and then they see what is extracted out of it. And rather than putting it in the ground for 40 years, the EPA has a test that they've approved for accelerating the aging, if you will, and that's what it is. And these panels would pass that toxic characteristic leach test.
He said we'd take one, not hundreds.
Had one what?
I'm picking with you.
One panel.
I said he would take one panel.
Yeah, well, yeah, typically it would use one.
All right,
It came out with a new design. So
let's keep this thing moving.
It's getting late.
Yep, it's getting late, and we got folks that I don't think they're part of a social studies class. I think they're here for a reason. So we'll move on.
So our final speaker tonight, before I just sum up really briefly, is Mr. Rich Kirkland, who will present his appraisal report that you have.
Good evening. Again, my name's Rich Kirkland, Kirkland Appraisals, 9408 Northfield Court, Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a commercial certified general appraiser in the state of North Carolina. Been appraising here for over 20 years. Also a MAI through the Appraisal Institute, and regularly appraise agricultural properties and look at commercial properties and subdivision development. I also regularly do an impact analysis, which is why I'm here tonight. Been looking at the question of solar farms and whether or not they impact adjoining properties for probably 8 or 9 years now. I've looked at about 600 solar farms in that time. I've worked on this type of analysis in 15 states at this point. The report, I realize you were just handed this report this evening, but I will summarize it, and then if you have questions, I'll be happy to walk through the whole report if you'd like. But the summary, I've done what's called a paired sales analysis. It's also called a matched pair analysis, where you look at sales of properties next to solar farms to see if they have any impact. You compare that sale to a similar property not next to a solar farm and measure to see if there's any impacts. I've looked at 13 different solar farms across the state, and all these are in North Carolina. I also have about 20 plus more solar farms I could identify in other states, but I've limited this report to just North Carolina. From those 13 solar farms, I've pulled 20 sales of homes, compared them to similar homes in that neighborhood but not near the solar farms to measure whether or not there's any impact on property value. Pages 31 and 32, you can see the full breakdown of all the homes and the comparison where I show that there's really no impact on adjoining property values. I'm finding anywhere from -1% to +5%, which is just in the static you'd have in regular real estate. I've also identified about 8 land sales next to solar farms, and those actually tend to show a slightly higher rate of a slight premium, actually, but it's still close to that static. So it really, it's my conclusion, looking at all this data, that there is no impact on adjoining property values. I've worked with a couple of university groups that are working on different national studies, and another PhD candidate across state. They're doing similar analysis right now, doing a much larger statistical analysis, and preliminary results are really falling right in line with what I've been showing so far. So it is my professional opinion that the proposed project here is going to have no impact on adjoining property values. And I thought I would just identify a little bit. I think your planning director identified a lot of this, but one of the main things I'm looking at are those distances to adjoining homes. I've measured homes as close as 125 feet, showing no impact on adjoining property values when you measure from the closest point on the house to the closest panel. In this case, the closest house I found was 365 feet, and the average distance was over 800 feet. So these homes are a lot further away from the panels than where I've measured in a lot of cases and found no impact on property value. Also, I've looked specifically at topography. I know that was brought up. The match pairs that I've looked at, they show topographic shifts across the solar farms of up to 150 feet. In this case, it was only about 80 feet. And that was actually looking across the entire tract, not just where the solar panels are going to be located. So again, my findings bracket the conditions at this location. The other aspect of the analysis that's presented here just shows you looking at where are solar farms located in the state, talking about the harmony of use and where solar farms are located. And the vast majority of the solar farms across the state are located in very similar locations where you've got primarily agricultural uses around the property. If you look at it, adjoining uses based on acreage. And if you look at adjoining uses based on the number of parcels, the most common use would be residential. There really are located in areas where you've got homes and fields meeting because you need the open space to put the panels in, but you also need to have infrastructure to be able to pull that power out and bring it to people who can use it. So this is a very consistent location with where I see solar farms across the state. Again, I'd be happy to go back into the report and go through more specific details, but it's my professional opinion that this is also a harmonious location for a solar farm.
Would anyone like to go through the whole report? No?
Thank you very much.
We appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.
Commissioners, just to sum up briefly, we believe that we have presented substantial, competent expert testimony that this development with the proposed conditions will not materially endanger the public health and safety. As Mr. Sandefur testified to, and as is shown in his affidavit, there's no odor, there is no noise impact, there's no noise pollution. These panels are safe, this technology is safe. We also submit that we have presented expert, substantial, competent testimony that this development will not substantially injure the value of adjoining properties. Mr. Kirkland just went over that and in great detail in his report. And finally, we submit that we have presented competent, substantial expert testimony that the location and character of this development is in harmony with the surrounding area. As we noted previously, this is in a rural agricultural area which does allow for the development of a solar energy system with the issuance of a conditional use permit. We believe that the topography and the site plan presented here with the setback and the natural buffering reduces any impact to adjoining properties and fits with the surrounding area. So for those reasons, we ask that you approve this conditional use permit, and we are happy to answer any additional questions that come up.
All right, thank you. All right, we're at the point in our meeting where we will solicit comments from the public. So if we have folks who would like to come up one at a time, just state your name and your address. Come on up. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Will. What are you doing? Okay, so those of you that know you would like to speak, if you all would come up, we'll have to swear all of you in. Either that or we'll have to do it one at a time, and so we're already.
You all will lay your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm Lee Goodnight from 355 Saw Road, China Grove. I'm not opposed to solar. I have solar at my house, but my question is, who's going to own these solars and who's going to take them down when they've served their time? How much of this is going to be considered as hazardous waste in 30 years from now? That's my question.
All right, thank you, Mr. Goodnight.
Okay.
Anything else? Yeah.
That's it.
Okay,
That's it.
they'll have an opportunity to come up afterwards and address your concern, okay? Yes, sir, next. Thank you for being here.
My name is Joe Allen. I live at 1170 Goodnight Lake Road, China Grove. And I have not been contacted by any of the developers of this project or the property owners of this project to hear any concerns that I might have. If you look at your monitor, at the very top of your monitor, there's two white triangles. The left triangle is my house. It is an unobstructed view from approximately less than 1,000 feet from where these solar panels will be constructed. And they will indeed create a significant visual impact on myself and my family, my 5 children and 12 grandchildren who come regularly to my house. I think it's very interesting to note that the photographs that were presented here tonight did not present a photograph, did not include a photograph of the view from my house, because it is definitely right there. I wish I'd had brought a picture for you to look at. But, you know, it's a very much a concern for me and for my family in regards to not only the visual impact, but also the depreciation of property value. And we heard the last speaker say that there was little or no devaluation of property values. But I ask you, if you were to buy my house located 1,000 feet from this, and that was an unobstructed view, and that's all you could see over there on that hill, would you pay me what I'm asking? I believe that you would not, and that indeed my property value will be decreased significantly. If you choose to approve this, then I would ask that you approve it only after a decommissioning plan in writing has been submitted to you for your consideration, in order to protect not just me and my family, but those families that they did take pictures of, the homes where they did take photographs. Because I believe that technology today, we can all look and we can see and know and experience, we have the speed at which things are occurring. And I doubt very seriously if the current solar panels that will be installed, I don't believe that they will be the solar panel to have in 5 years from now. In fact, I believe that within 10 years they probably would be considered obsolete, and certainly no one would want them. And so then you have the problem of the decommissioning of the project and how the land is left. I'm not sure that I mentioned this, but you see where I live. And I heard some testimony as to letters being sent to the property owners directly. I've received nothing from anybody, no communication whatsoever, until I got this letter on the notice from the county just about maybe a week or two ago, dated August the 6th. So I don't really know what else to say other than that I am opposed to this project.
All right,
Thank you for your time, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, for being here. All right, next.
Good evening. My name is Chip Brandt. I'm from 1420 Goodnight Lake Road, which is, if you look at the center of your topography right there, you'll see like a light gray line, and that's the end of my airstrip. I like to fly quite a bit. I have other people that fly into my property and everything like that, and I'm a little bit concerned if they don't have reflective glass on this thing, somebody coming in for a landing and be blinded and crash.
Sir, is your strip on the right-of-way for the pipes, for the gas? Is that what you're talking about? Where's?
If you look straight, straight at the top of the topography right there, there's like a light gray line, straight line going north-south. The very top of the page, just to the right of center.
That's the right of way.
Gotcha. Okay.
You see it?
Yes.
But anyway, I've been there for quite a few years, and I like to be on the safe side of everything. And if you do allow to put this in, I would ask you require it to be a non-reflective glass, because, you know, we don't want people getting hurt. And, you know, we heard people say that there was no danger to anybody around. That is a clear and apparent danger if you're coming in and you're getting close to the ground and all of a sudden you're blinded by the glare of a reflective mirror. And that's really all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brandt.
Can I address him?
Yeah.
Chip, I'm well aware of your flights. Used to be across the street from my house. We had a similar situation when we agreed to put a solar farm in very close proximity to the airport. And this was one of the concerns that a lot of the pilots addressed. And they showed us information, and this has been 5 years ago, so I'm sure they're better, but the panels that they have there have almost no reflective ability because they absorb the light instead of reflecting it off. So I really don't think this would be detrimental to what you're doing.
Hope not.
I can't say because I don't fly, but I'm saying this concern has been addressed before in a much larger scale. So I really don't think that particular thing is going to be something that's going to cause you any undue stress or whatever. So, but thanks for coming.
Mm-hmm.
Did y'all do a glare study? Was there a cause to do a, because you're not on a flight path of a...
Yeah, every solar farm has to go through basically a process where you look at the coordinates, the four corners of the project, and submit that to the FAA. And if you're in a certain criteria, then you have to do a further study. So this did go through that process, and the initial screening passed it. So,
is that the same as a glare study?
It's what determines if you need to do a further glare study. So, yes.
So what is that study saying, that there's just not significant enough traffic to worry about it?
Oh, I think
or it's just not an issue because of your panels?
Right. So this in particular, I think actually looks at proximity to airways. I'm not sure that Mr. Brandt's airway would have shown up, but it does look at proximity to, I guess, more formal airways. But
it would show up, wouldn't it? Chip? Chip, what?
It's not registered.
Okay. All right, not registered. All right.
But to your point, there is, a number of examples. The Denver airport, the Indianapolis airport, they all have large-scale solar farms of this size right next to the actual airport.
Have them on the airport, like the Denver airport. It's part of their energy plan.
And I will just also mention that every solar panel that we procure is treated with an anti-reflective coating. That's standard industry practice. And so by those two natures, those are good examples of how no harmful glare even for flight purposes will be present. And that's something, we would welcome as a condition if the board so chooses. We would be happy with that.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Allen spoke, and he asked about the decommissioning. I think we've kind of beat that up a little bit. So they're part of this, on page 4 of our staff report, there are 6 conditions, and one of the conditions is that there be a written documented decommissioning report, or decommissioning agreement for all solar equipment. So,
prior to?
Yes, sir. It would be a condition of the approval. Okay.
And I would also note one of the concerns Mr. Allen brought up that we've heard also is that as technology continues to evolve, there may be new panels. In our discussion about scrapping and recycling, it wasn't saying that you'd be able to go on the market and sell the panels per se. The materials themselves are copper and aluminum, which will, we expect there always to be a market for in some way, shape, or form. So that would be where the value would be derived from. You heard from Mr. Sandifer extensively on that.
Shane, could you come up and comment? I know there are some parameters when you are making notice. Mr. Allen says he's 1,000 feet. Would he not be in that required parameter?
100 feet.
100 feet. But you went up to what?
150.
100 feet.
Went up. Oh, so you just. 150. You just notified. Well, there's no one within 100 feet. Who did you notify?
This boundary here,
Oh.
everybody within 100 feet of that large boundary of the 151 acres.
Okay. So, all right. Yeah, if you're gonna need to get sworn in if you want to come speak.
Lay your left hand and raise your right. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Thank you.
Hey. You're now also a sheriff deputy, by the way, so. Yeah.
David Irvin, 2480 Saul Road. I also have an airport that's not very far from there, which is a NC airport that has NC 50. It's that's directly downwind from us, which is, in the pattern that you would fly to actually go to the airport. Also has a helicopter pad for the Indianville Fire Department that's used for emergencies. I'm not, this is really tough because Osco and I are such close friends. I lease property from him and everything else. And I just had some concern that if a complete study like that was done, that they did not pick up a registered airport in such a rural vicinity, that they're saying it is because it's a little more populated than actually.
What's the name of your airport?
It's Irvin Airport, NC 50. There's also another one that's registered about 3 or 4 miles from there. Actually, there's 4 or 5 in the area. So, but, it's just something that I was curious about. That, again, I haven't talked to anyone about anything, and had no intentions of even speaking, but just wanted to make sure that that they did address all the community.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Irvin.
So, Mr. Chairman, does it say here that they checked a 7-mile radius, or am I? reading what that said in this, in the
Page
report.
you on?
It's on the first page of the, I guess it's the report. It says the,
Is there not a page number?
page 1.
Page 1, I'm sorry. You did say the first page, didn't you? Yeah, on page 1 of the report, it says, systems proposed within the approach surface contain a horizontal surface of the airport zone overlay shall provide FAA Form 7460-1, and the comments from staff, property is not within the AZO and would be approximately 7 miles from the reference portion of the zone. I'm not real sure what
that means either.
Yeah, it's from our airport.
Oh, from our airport, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine that the FAA missed 2 registered. So, do you have anything to say?
I was just going to point that part out in the staff report. Also, just wanted it to note that from my understanding of the comment here, and we certainly understand concerns, it's of the reflective nature of the panels. Shane addressed that. Chris can go into more detail if you want to get into the nuts and bolts of it. I think it's best addressed by the fact that we do not oppose the condition proposed by staff about the anti-reflection. That will be a condition of the issuance of this conditional use permit, that have that quality.
Yeah, and to reiterate what Commissioner Pierce said, we went through this a few years ago and delayed it over a couple of meetings to get more and more and more information on it. And this airport, or this solar farm, I think it was 50 acres right outside the airport, and it just was not an issue. And obviously with the thousands of operations we've got going on at Mid-Carolina Regional, we were concerned about that, but those were allayed.
I just have a brief rebuttal in general if the commission. So I think in terms of Mr. Goodnight and Mr. Brandt and Mr. Irvin, we've addressed largely those which centered around decommissioning and then impact to aircraft. Again, we are happy to answer any questions that come up. Mr. Allen, from during our review, during his comments, is about 900 feet away from the property, approximately. In talking to my client, we did try to reach out to adjacent property owners, and knowing that he was right there, there was an attempt that was made to send him information. Again, we don't know what happened there, if it was an incorrect address, but there was an attempt made to contact him, knowing that he was nearby to the property. A couple points, the first being he discussed the depreciation and property value. We submit that we have a state licensed appraiser who has given you substantial expert testimony about the impact to adjoining properties, showing that it will not materially endanger or cause any material depreciation to adjacent properties based upon his match pairs analysis. Mr. Kirkland is happy to get up and discuss that more in detail. Additionally, as to the sight lines, we believe that given the topography, the layout here, that sight lines will be diminished substantially from Saw Road. We understand Mr. Allen's concern. We will also point out that there's no requirement in the ordinance for additional buffering here. And given the layout and the topography, we believe that it wasn't called for. We believe that this site is oriented in the best way possible to reduce any impact to adjoining properties, taking all of those properties into consideration, and that we presented substantial evidence through Mr. Shields' testimony about the site and through Mr. Sandifer and Mr. Kirkland's testimony about harmony of use. We believe that we've met our burden here, and again, we're happy to address any of these if you have further questions.
Well, did you have something?
No, just on the map, could someone just reiterate where 1170 Goodnight is again? Is that the one in the middle here?
Sir, if you look straight at the top of the display, the very top white, that one right there, that's 1170 Goodnight Lake Road. That's where I live.
So while they may qualify, we still have the ability to do conditions. And I just wonder about the reasonableness of adding something. Of all the folks we've talked, I think we've answered questions for Mr. Irvin and Mr. Brandt. I think I'm most concerned about Mr. Allen. So would it be reasonable to ask for some type of vegetative buffering between his place and?
Yes, I think that's something we'd certainly be open to. We'd be happy with a condition of a double row buffer of 20 feet or something of that sort.
I appreciate his willingness to consider that, but I would ask that if that is in fact approved and they will provide some type of buffering, that buffer be prepared and discussed with my wife and myself for our approval, or at least our consideration and our input as to whether or not that would be sufficient.
We've done that in the past, and should the board make that as a proposal, probably we would add that in here, depending on what the majority of the board says, but that has been done.
We can certainly consult with them. But not condition it on their acceptance and approval of it. Right. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
But we have let people have input in the past.
Thank you.
And Mr. Allen, I don't think these people represent somebody that's not going to try to do everything they can to make you happy.
I've not seen any. My only concern is they say they made efforts to contact us. Well, my address has been 1170 Goodnight Lake Road since we built the house in 2005.
And I get it, believe me.
And he can see me when they're over there. They can see our house, and yet they didn't make any photographs of it or our view. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, so I think we're at that point. We've had our petitioner comments. Are we done with public comment? Is there anyone else? We want to give every opportunity. All right, if not, then we're going to close the hearing. And so Shane, did you give us findings of fact?
Right there.
Is that what that is? All right, I've got it. I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
Thank you. All right, so we'll need to vote individually on these findings of fact. Fact one, the development of the property in accordance with the proposed conditions will not materially endanger the public health or safety. Fact one, the proposed warning signage and security fence will caution individuals of potential hazards while restricting unauthorized access. And fact two, site construction will be in accordance with the Building Inspections Department and engineering certifications to ensure the panels are properly installed and securely anchored. I make that in form of a motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number two, that the development of the property in accordance with the proposed conditions will not substantially injure the value of adjoining and abutting property, or the development is a public necessity. In fact, as North Carolina State Certified General Appraiser Richard Kirkland provided testimony summarizing statements from impact study, which concluded the proposed application will leave no impact on the value of adjoining or abutting property. Offer that in the form of a motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Third motion, that the location and character of the development in accordance with the proposed conditions will be in general harmony with the area in which it is located and in general conformity with any adopted county plans. Fact one, based on the site plan and staff report, visual impacts to surrounding residences should be minimized based on proximity and site topography. Fact two, the use of solar panels with anti-reflective coating will reduce potential glare on adjoining properties. Fact three, inverter and transformer equipment will be located 150 feet from exterior property lines to minimize potential noise impacts. And fact four, the required decommissioning plan ensures the property will be returned to its previous state should the system cease power production.
I would add the caveat about the screening for Mr. Allen.
We'll pick that up in the, on page 4 on the conditions.
All right, second.
Okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so then,
May I say one other thing? in
oh,
regards
boy.
to decommissioning?
No,
In what you just proposed, what you were just now proposing, in regards to the decommissioning, that it be done within a reasonable amount of time.
it's part of the condition of the agreement. So it is part of this is conditional on that. There's no question that there will be a decommissioning plan in our hands as part of this lease agreement, or they'll violate this and will not be allowed to drive the first piece of equipment in there.
My concern is that if it is to be decommissioned, for whatever reason, that it be decommissioned within a reasonable amount of time from the time it ceases to be effective.
Now that's actually a good idea. Well, boy, we're at this point.
Put it in your other statement.
Yeah, okay, we'll address that, okay? Yes, sir. That's actually, he brings up a good point.
And I can address that by saying that is.
Come on up.
Yeah, so that is.
We're probably stepping all over our rules here, but we just want to make sure we're doing the right thing.
No, and
okay?
I just wanted, I was ready to pop up just for clarity's sake. There is a timeline is included in the decommissioning.
Okay,
plan.
well, that's good. Do you know?
I have not looked at this, but it is not something that can drag on for years and years. That is, in standard decommissioning plans, it is a period usually measured in months.
Could we say within 12 months?
Yes.
Yes, all right. I like this guy. All right. Would that be satisfactory? Decommission within 12 months?
That would be satisfactory.
Okay. All right, so then we would move, or I would move then to approve CUP 02-19 with the conditions found on page 4, the 6 conditions, adding a 7th condition where SAW Solar would work with our planning department, and while you can't approve the plan, with input from Mr. Allen. Okay, is that okay with you? Everyone good with that? And then an 8th condition would be that the decommissioning timeline be within 12 months of the end of the operation, however y'all want to legally put that. Is that all right?
Second.
Okay.
Could we leave the technical terms, let our attorney go over that? Because, you know, things could happen that folks say, well, it's a solar farm, it's been here and has still been generating electricity, but we're not transmitting it because it's not worthwhile. So we need to have some definition of an ongoing concern.
Operating, so if he has, how many panels are you going to have out there? See, we got to think about all this stuff. Let's say you got 1,000 panels and one of them still working.
I think in our decommissioning plan, we say the useful life is when the farm ceases production. And I think by that would imply tying into the grid with Duke Energy, since we do have to, with what power we produce on site, tie into the existing grid at the point of interconnection there. So at the cease of production, I'm not sure. I'm not an attorney. I don't know the best language, but when the solar farm ceases production.
You see the concern, though, is as long as you leave one operating.
I mean, I think the language there covers it. I mean, financially speaking, economically speaking, leaving one functioning isn't economically prudent, but I think that would also be a right of the property owner there.
Well, yeah, you'd also have to be
you'd
have to be leasing the ground at considerable cost to operate one.
Correct. I mean, practically
panel
speaking, that's just not a.
In order to avoid a $250,000 cleanup, which probably doesn't make much sense.
So I think that the best definition is the one that Shane just, because it does create a clear demarcation, a clear line with the termination of the site.
Okay. All right. That's good. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Everyone okay? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you for everyone's time.
I
Thank
just
you-
have one more thing.
Thank you for your input, homeowners. Appreciate it.
I do want sheep.
Thank you all so much for your time. Look forward to working with you further.
Mr. Chairman, since we're on this subject here, seems like we all have questions about the decommissioning part. Do you wonder if we should think about a moratorium and have something better in place for us before we look at another one? I don't know if there's any. coming up
Shane and
before us.
Ed, could we have y'all up here and ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
So, is there any in the pipeline right now coming through the office? Any more solar farms?
2.
2? How long before they would get to us, do you think?
One of them next month.
Next month. So I don't know, I mean, I don't know what the rest of the commission thinks.
I think a moratorium, so we can answer some of these decommissioning questions, would affect those in the pipeline, would they?
I doubt this one. They've been working on this one for a while, but I would have deferred to Mr. County Attorney for that. But the 2 I'm speaking of, one's definitely pretty far along. They've submitted all the information necessary to make it on this board's agenda, should you choose to select that, we're assuming, date. The other is still in concept form.
What if we set a moratorium effective October 1st? And then turn this over to the planning board to get a more definitive conclusion to what we need to include in these solar farm conditional use permits?
We need to schedule a public hearing and do some stuff on the staff side. And so I think if you want to have us look at a proposed schedule for a public hearing and to draft the notices and present that back to the board, we can do that.
All right.
If that satisfies you, Commissioner Pierce?
Commissioner Caskey.
I mean,
good.
He's the one asking the question.
No, I was responding
Thank
to
you.
your comment. I was responding to your comment, though.
Whatever.
That's good. Let's move on.
Needs to be some more.
All right, thank you all.
These other 3 on next.
Yeah, we want to just push these to the next meeting, the rest of these.
I think that's what we do.
I just like to sit them, I just like to see you sit here all night. Well,
Get buried so deep on the agenda.
because you're a short timer, that's why.
I'm just joking.
All right, what do you have for us? You
What I didn't do.
got 2 minutes.
All right, well, I hope this will be a quick one. Have Danny Norman here with Ramsey Bergen Smith, and Danny opened bids for the library project last week on Thursday, which is too late for your agenda packet, so I provided the information to you. We do have a certified bid tabulation with you, in front of you, and are requesting that you approve a bid with Vertex Construction Company, which is a local Rowan County company, to move forward with the West Rowan Library project. And I'll take any questions that you might have, and I or Danny.
What was the budget on this, 650?
687, I think.
So we're 50,000 over?
Yes, sir, just a bit over.
Are you guys going to raise that?
We're over the projected architect's budget, but we're under the county manager's budget.
Really?
And we have raised more than we
Budget was
promised.
too high then.
That's
It's
one
more
way to
money than
look
we
at it.
promised. I know there is going to answer your question, there will be some more money coming for this project, but it will be for paint and carpet in the main part of the library that wasn't included in this project itself.
And do you know who that's coming from?
Yes, I do.
You tell us, please.
Yes, the Library Foundation is taking that up.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
What do you need, a motion?
Yep, motion to approve the.
Second.
I
Vertex
didn't even
Construction.
get it out. Vertex, past your bedtime?
Yes.
All right, we have a
Sleep now.
motion and a second to approve the bid tab for Vertex Construction. Any discussion?
And that does include the alternate one?
The 737 includes alternate one, which is,
Make sure that's in the
yes, we
motion.
need a fire alarm system, sir.
You're right next door to a fire department. Why do you need a fire alarm? Is it a megaphone or
Let's get a window.
a slingshot or something?
A couple cans and a wire.
A couple cans and a wire? Really? Are they putting a fire alarm in the new EMS? And never mind. All right, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Thank you for sticking around.
But I want to tell you, one of the reasons this is slightly over is the demolition at this site was, did more damage than was anticipated to the property. And so we are correcting some of the damage that was caused during demolition. If you go look at the property, you can see where some steps and platforms were damaged significantly that will have to be replaced, as well as the electrical system was completely ripped out of the buildings with a track hoe rather than being disconnected.
Well, are they not?
This was the school system. That was before we had ownership of the property.
Yeah, but do they not have insurance to cover damage?
I don't think we're a party to that coverage.
Well, no, the school system didn't take this down. They had a contractor that did it.
And
So
they
we can
approved it.
Look into that. Just say yeah. Yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah. All right, next, finance. Thank you for sticking around. Yeah.
Okay. The first graph shows annual cumulative revenue comparisons for the month of July, which is our first month in the new fiscal year. And I say this every August when we're talking about July, and that's that our three major sources of revenue are property taxes, sales tax, and federal and state grants. Property taxes post as revenue to the general ledger 1 month in arrears. We collect money, but then when we have reports from the tax collector's office at month end, and we know all the cash that was received for the prior month, we reconcile, and that's when we post revenue. So we received money in July, but that will post to the general ledger in August. Sales tax, as you know, runs 3 months behind. So we received revenue in July, sales tax money, but it goes back to the prior year. And it will continue to go back to the prior year through September. And then the majority of our grants, whether they be federal, state, or local, are reimbursement basis. So we generally report on a monthly basis, so we spent money in July. We'll report that and we'll receive revenue in August for those expenditures. So you can see that we've received almost 1% of our budgeted revenue so far.
More than that.
Excuse me?
More than that.
We will need more than that. The next graph is expenditures. So at the beginning of the year, yeah, we're a little upside down on the general ledger. But for the last 4 years, we've spent between 4.5% and 5% of budget in the month of July. So we're right on target. with what I would expect. The next graph is going to show property tax comparisons. And so this, unlike the first two graphs, those graphs went from fiscal year 2017 through fiscal year 2020. This goes from 2016 through 2019. And so property tax collections for the year, 80.7 million. A year ago, we were at 79.9 million. And that was 100.6% of our budget. So that was on target. Sales tax has continued to be very good in Rowan County. Through the month of April, we've received 22.1 million. A year ago, it was 20.2 million. And from April 2019 versus April 2018, it's a 9% increase in sales tax revenue, which is very good.
Well, and I've been assured as soon as Home Goods opens, that may go to 60 million.
Okay.
Yeah, just based on the comments I'm getting from
That come
folks.
from your wife.
My wife, yeah, just my wife alone.
All right. We'll take that. And the next graph just shows, it shows sales tax by month. And as you can see, the red line, which is for fiscal year 2019, it, for the most part, stays significantly above the other months. For the month of April, we received 2.3 million, and a year in 2018, we received 2 million. So that's the report unless someone has questions.
Nope. All right, thank you very much. Item number 12, motion to approve budget amendments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, let me find my speech.
Read your statement. Okay. We have a 5-minute recess after you read your statement.
Yeah.
Got a bladder, but I don't have an oil gun.
I resemble that remark.
I know what you're saying.
I had no last
Break. Finish that one. And leave.
All right, I move the board now move into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3 for attorney-client privilege, communication pertaining to a filed lawsuit regarding Topaz Development LLC versus Cabarrus County and Rowan County. Make that in form of motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we'll get back started here in 5 minutes as we clear the room.
Will we adjourn?
All right, so we're back, and before we adjourn, I did want to say into the record that we are really, really proud of our girls softball team. Went to Oregon last week, played in the World Series championship, and came home victors again, the second time since 2015. The numbers, statistics on that, I think are. I'd like to get Catawba or Livingstone to do a statistical analysis of 24,000 teams around the world and have made it 4 out of the last 5 times and won it twice. I'd like to know what the probability of that is. But Coach Yang and his team and the young ladies represented us so well. I know we'll have more to say about that. Maybe we'll organize something with the city again to celebrate the team and their coaches. But congratulations to our girls softball team. We're so proud of you, and man, it just does wonders for Rowan County. So it's just a great, great thing. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.